Our story begins with a prayer of gratitude, as the heavens seem to be blessing this sacred land. The potential here is staggering, extraordinary skeletal structures and a spiritual aura that reaches the very clouds. Out of 16 young candidates, an incredible 15 have been revealed to possess the rare earthly talent. Looking at the spectacle, Mu felt certain this grand display was meant for him. He was quite impressed with himself. He was a transmigrator who had survived on the kindness of the villagers, growing up on the food of 100 households. It was, to be honest, the textbook beginning for a legendary protagonist. He waited for his turn, convinced that the final, most spectacular reveal of a child of destiny could belong to no one else but him. But when the stone stayed dark, he nervously asked the Immortal if there was a loose connection or perhaps a lack of power. The Immortal's diagnosis was grim. His spiritual veins were as rigid as iron, and his dantian was as dry as parched earth. He didn't even possess the lowest grade of spiritual roots. In disbelief, Mu begged the Immortal to check just one more time. After all, he had always been the undisputed leader of this group of youngsters. The Immortal simply sighed, noting that no matter how many times he checked, Mu was nothing more than a mortal. His friends tried to comfort him, telling Brother Mu that he needed to stay strong despite the news. They pointed out that the world of cultivation is far too dangerous and likely wasn't suited for him anyway, since all 15 of them were heading off to start their lives as cultivators. The village was left with over 50 acres of farmland and nearly 50 elderly residents. The entire burden of tilling the soil and caring for the seniors now rested solely on his shoulders. With all the able-bodied youths leaving to pursue immortality, someone had to stay behind. And so, they gave him one final request. They were hungry, and it was time for Brother Mu to get to work in the fields. He looked out at the hundreds of acres of land, realizing with a heavy heart that he was expected to farm it all alone. To be honest, this felt like a fate far more grueling than any backbreaking factory labor he could imagine. Desperate, Mu turned back to the Immortal, pleading for a chance, any chance, to be taken away from this life. He argued that he could do anything: farm, cook, wash dishes, or even handle the most menial chores for the sect. Leaving a man with no spiritual talent to handle the entire village's workload seemed, in his eyes, a bit excessive. He felt that this burden was worse than death itself, but the Immortal quickly silenced him with a sharp command. The Immortal reminded him that a sacred land of cultivation was no place for a commoner. They simply couldn't justify bringing a mortal back just to waste their precious resources and food. However, seeing the young man's plight, the Immortal decided to offer a small mercy. He handed Mu a basic chi refining manual, a parting gift to acknowledge his situation. While it wouldn't be enough to help him achieve immortality or ascend to the heavens, it would at least give him a bit more physical strength to handle his daily chores in the fields. Mu's spirit suddenly flared with a classic protagonist's resolve, thinking of the old saying that fortunes always change with time. He told himself that as long as he had a cultivation technique in his hands, there was still hope. As a transmigrator, he was certain he could eventually make something of himself, no matter how humble the start. He began to count the characters on the cover. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In his mind, the longer the name of the technique, the more devastating its hidden power must be. He admired the aggressive, sweeping brushstrokes of the calligraphy, convinced he was holding a legendary treasure. He imagined it was a secret manual of some peerless master, perhaps something that would change his destiny forever. But as he looked closer, he realized in utter disbelief that he couldn't understand a single word of this gibberish. He stared at the pages, realizing these weren't even Chinese characters, yet he was convinced they held the power to change his destiny. He cursed the woman for giving him a book he couldn't even read, but then a new thought occurred to him. He reasoned that all writing eventually evolves from simple pictograms, which gave him a sudden spark of hope. The figures in the illustrations were drawn in such bizarre, twisted poses that their bones seemed to be warping on the page. Mu decided that true greatness must be found in simplicity, concluding this was a technique meant to shatter and rebuild his very skeleton. He was certain it was an ancient, divine art designed to squeeze every ounce of potential from his mortal flesh. Just then, an elderly neighbor called out to him, bringing over a couple of steamed buns to check on him. Startled, Mu looked up and asked the old woman what she was doing barging in like that. She chided him for not locking his door, calling him a silly boy as she made herself at home. To be honest, after a lifetime in the village, there wasn't much left that could actually surprise her. She sighed, thinking the poor boy had been so traumatized by the Immortals that he was now holding his book upside down. She told him to stop pretending to meditate and just make sure he ate his dinner before it got cold. Mu scoffed, telling himself that a mere mortal couldn't possibly understand the true nature of a transmigrator's divine study. But as he tried to focus, he suddenly noticed blood on his teeth, a sign that something was going very wrong. He wondered if this was the legendary Great Path manifesting within him, repeating the thought in a daze of excitement. He asked himself if this was the peak of the first level of chi refining, the fabled process of cleansing the marrow. In his mind, he wasn't just bleeding. He was purging the impurities from his body to make room for greatness. He felt a surge of pride, convinced that he was a once-in-a-10,000-year genius of cultivation. He imagined the 3 flowers of spiritual energy gathering at the crown of his head in a magnificent display. After only half a day, he truly believed he had already reached the absolute pinnacle of the martial arts world. His vision began to blur, but he told himself this was normal, merely his mortal eyes failing to keep pace with his newly awakened spatial perception. We see his neighbor looking on in confusion, asking if he even realized his own mother was heading out to the fields right in front of him. The old man snapped that he was his uncle, then gestured toward the figure leading Mu and asked who he thought that was. He pointed out that the figure was actually Uncle Nyo, yet Mu was busy calling a literal ox Aniwang. The villagers whispered that the poor boy was far too young to have both his mind and his eyes fail him so completely. Regardless of what others thought, Mu was certain that the violent swirl of black energy in his dantian would never lie to him. He told himself that he, Mu, was destined to rise above everyone else and claim his rightful place. He criticized the old immortal's lack of precision, deciding that the energy circulation routes in the book were entirely incorrect. Fortunately, a genius like himself was there to fix them, finally perfecting the technique he called the Great Thief's Infinite Withered Hand. Only now did he consider it complete. After all, what was mere earthly talent compared to his divine insights? He envisioned himself achieving victory through his physical body alone, reaching a state of absolute perfection. A little later, a neighbor urged Mu to take a break, noting that he had already plowed over 30 mu of land without stopping. The village oxen didn't even work this hard, but Mu simply told the old woman not to worry about him. In his own mind, he was a peerless immortal at the peak of chi refining, far beyond the limits of a normal human. He boasted that he could plow another 50 mu without breaking a single drop of sweat, which, naturally, was a bit of an exaggeration. Meanwhile, 2 shady figures watched from the shadows, telling each other to move fast, while one of them kept watch. Everyone on Mon Mountain knew this kid had received a treasure from an immortal 3 years ago, and that his martial arts were now divine. They were convinced his physical strength was purely a result of practicing that secret, godly technique. As they peeked at his notes, they marveled at the sinister energy flow, certain they had stumbled upon an ancient, forbidden demonic art. Believing they had finally hit the jackpot after 3 long years of waiting, they prepared to make their move and retreat. Mu wondered to himself what level his old childhood friends from the village had managed to reach by now. He decided that once his Great Thief's Infinite Withered Hand was perfected, he would find them and show them how far he'd surpassed them. Suddenly, a voice called out, urging Mu to return quickly because a traveling scholar had just arrived in the village. The messenger explained that the village chief considered Mu the most educated and wanted him to host the guest. A scholar, a man who traveled hundreds of miles just to teach people how to read, was exactly what Mu needed. He realized with a surge of excitement that he would finally learn the true name of his secret technique. A short time later, we see Mu greeting the visitor with a respectful bow, introducing himself as young Mu. The scholar was immediately struck by the boy's presence, noting the incredibly powerful physical energy radiating from him. He marveled at the fact that such a remote mountain village could be hiding such a physical prodigy. The scholar mentioned that the village chief had praised Mu for being exceptionally diligent and eager to learn. He noted that it was a pity the boy's only real struggle was a lack of proper resources and guidance. Since he was passing through today, the scholar offered to give Mu a bit of personal instruction. Mu thanked him for his great kindness, feeling as though his moment of destiny had finally arrived. He quickly presented his notes and asked the teacher how these specific characters were actually supposed to be read. The old man remarked that while the handwriting was quite atrocious, he could still make out the words. He calmly explained that these 5 characters spelled out the Xiantian Qi refining method. Mu froze in disbelief, stammering as he asked the scholar to repeat how many characters he saw there. The scholar confirmed it was the Xiantian Qi refining method, 5 characters in total, and wondered why the boy looked so shocked. Mu's mind raced, wondering how it could only be 5 characters when he had clearly counted 7 for his Great Thief's Infinite Withered Hand. The scholar scoffed at the mention of a withered hand, explaining it was just a common, basic 5-word manual found on every street corner. The scholar looked at him with concern, asking if he had actually been practicing this basic breathing method for 3 whole years. Mu realized with horror that he had been practicing his ancestors' technique backward for 3 years, even adding his own personal notes. He began to panic, wondering what kind of soul-corrupting, chaotic mess he had actually managed to create within his own body. Deep down, he desperately wondered if it was too late to disperse his current energy and start his cultivation all over again. The scholar explained that the Xiantian method was about absorbing the essence of heaven and earth to become elegant and light. However, Mu's interpretation of the Great Thief's Hand was entirely focused on raw, brutal muscle and physical hardening. His version was designed to shatter spines and crush bodies with a single, unstoppable punch, hardly the path of elegance. He had essentially trained himself as a berserker instead of a mage, and he knew this simply couldn't continue. Determined not to let the mistake go any further, he decided he must take the original book back to Mr. Bai immediately. He planned to ask for guidance word by word, but then he let out a cry of pure shock. The manual on his desk had vanished into thin air, and with it, 3 years of his absolute blood, sweat, and tears. He told himself that whoever stole it was welcome to it, because over the last 3 years, he had been quite thorough. He had flipped through those worn pages thousands of times, and the contents were no longer just on paper. 80% of the manual was already burned into his memory, etched permanently into his very mind. As for the remaining 20%, since he knew the beginning and the end, filling in the gaps would be easy. To be honest, guessing the rest was child's play. The original manual was merely version 1.0 in his eyes. The distorted version he had been blindly practicing was version 2.0, but today, things were going to change. He sat down to write out from memory the modified, ultimate 3.0 version of his unique cultivation path. While those so-called geniuses at the flying Immortal Holy Land were still struggling with the basic version 1.0, our young Mu had already successfully developed the advanced 3.0 version of his own legendary technique. Furthermore, for this new version, he decided to write the entire manual using traditional Han characters. Forget about common mountain bandits. Even the most powerful masters wouldn't be able to decipher a single word. He felt it was finally time for the people of this cultivation world to experience the true frustration of being completely illiterate. Suddenly, something exploded within him, but no, his cultivation hadn't been destroyed. In that moment, we see him realize that every single cell in his body was practically dancing with joy. The sensation of raw, overwhelming power was unlike anything he had ever felt before. Deep down, he truly believed that he had become invincible in this world. It was strong, perhaps a bit too strong, to be perfectly honest. But then, he noticed a slight problem. The manual stated that as one cultivates, the energy vortex in the dantian should grow larger until it eventually forms a Tao foundation. That foundation serves as the core for the golden core stage, but his own vortex had simply vanished. He couldn't find a trace of a foundation anywhere, leaving him wondering how he was supposed to progress. After a moment of thought, he convinced himself that cultivation always required the support of spirit pills and treasures. He concluded that he was simply too powerful, and a lack of nutritional resources had caused his energy to scatter. And so, we follow him into the deep, remote forests where few people ever dare to venture. He was certain the ground would be covered in 10,000-year-old ginseng and legendary spirit reishi mushrooms. With a burst of renewed confidence, he set off to claim his rightful treasures. Drawing on his extensive knowledge of web novels, he decided his first move was to cross the Saddle Mountain, which, as we will soon see, was a far more ambitious plan than he realized. He was convinced that ahead lay an untouched treasure trove, where he could already see countless precious herbs. They seemed to be beckoning him forward, but then he reached a place called Shurja Village. He stared at the entrance, telling himself that this place simply didn't suit his grand ambitions. Wasn't this just a common rural village he had visited before? It certainly looked familiar. But he realized it shouldn't be in this location at all. The direction was completely wrong. He wondered if he had lost his way, and decided it was better to just head back home for now. Suddenly, a thick, nauseating stench hit him, the unmistakable smell of blood and decay. To his horror, he saw the village had been slaughtered. It was a scene of absolute devastation. He had barely seen a chicken slaughtered in his life, and now he was facing this literal living hell. Just then, we see a figure flash past him. It was Brother Mu, moving with incredible haste. The speed was breathtaking. As a scholar of the Confucian path, he was no stranger to fast movement. However, that kind of velocity was usually reserved for powerful masters flying on spirit swords. To see someone running on 2 legs at the speed of a flying sword was something else entirely. It was the first time in his life he had witnessed such a feat, and he knew this person was extraordinary. He told himself that a master's every action must have a profound and hidden meaning. But the killers were closing in, and the poor man felt his head itching with pure, unadulterated panic. He wondered, quite ironically, if his brain was finally starting to grow under the pressure. A desperate cry escaped his lips as the danger became far too real to ignore. He begged for his life, and for a moment, we might have thought he was a hidden master. But it seems we were mistaken. To be perfectly honest, he was acting like a complete coward. Mu told him to let go first, asking if someone was actually chasing him down to kill him. He stammered that there was no one, so Mu asked which powerful figure he had managed to offend. The man looked confused and admitted that, as far as he knew, he hadn't offended anyone at all. Mu then asked the obvious question. What on earth was he doing going to Shurja Village? He explained that an immortal from the Phaeacian Holy Land had gifted him a cultivation manual. Lately, he felt as though his cultivation had hit a bit of a bottleneck, or so he thought. So, he decided to head into the mountains to dig up some spiritual herbs and heavenly treasures. Mu looked at the manual and wondered what kind of absolute nonsense he was reading. Setting aside the strange, simplified characters for a moment, the text was a complete mess. It was full of typos he had never seen, and the energy circulation path was utterly absurd. The technique forced true chi to reverse through the meridians, a certain death sentence for any practitioner. It would inevitably lead to chi deviation and a violent death. How this boy was still alive was a mystery. It was a miracle, truly. Mu decided that since they had met, he couldn't just leave him like this. Our Confucian path teaches us to help those in need, so Mu handed him a different scroll. He warned him never to practice those random things scribbled on walls or fake manuals again. The man's eyes widened, asking if this was the legendary Hao Ian longevity technique. Mu told him to be quiet, explaining it was actually the orthodox Confucian Haoran righteousness art. Practicing it would cultivate a noble spirit within him, offering infinite and wonderful uses. The man wondered aloud what this Haoran righteousness looked like and how it was so useful. Mu explained that it is invisible and colorless, for it is the pure, righteous chi of heaven and earth. It nourishes the soul and keeps all evil at bay, ensuring that darkness cannot draw near. Mu told him he would understand in time, but to cultivate the Haoran righteousness art, one must harbor justice in their heart. His current cowering state showed a lack of mental clarity. Without that inner resolve, it would be impossible for him to even reach the first stage. The art focuses on acting freely. One can cultivate it while farming or even while doing laundry. Even studying ancestral books can nurture this spirit, but the man was still hesitant to leave. He insisted the outside world was far too dangerous, though Mu reminded him that any place would suffice. Eventually, the man decided to give it a try, hoping he had finally hit the jackpot. With a sudden burst of misplaced confidence, he shouted for himself to charge forward. But something felt wrong. Mu had clearly stated that Haoran righteousness was invisible and colorless. He looked at his own energy in confusion, wondering why it was a bright, vivid yellow. Convinced he was doing something wrong, he decided to keep switching his approach. Yes, naturally. Then, a realization hit him. They say true techniques are never passed down easily. He concluded that the manual Mu gave him must be a simplified, anti-piracy version. That was why he couldn't produce the colorless energy. He wouldn't let himself be tricked so easily. Since that was the case, he decided he would simply extract the essence for himself. He began tinkering, determined to create his own Haoran Righteousness 2.0 version of the technique. He was hell-bent on cracking the anti-piracy code to make the technique truly his own. In just one day and night, he managed to rewrite a supreme Confucian art from the Faxian Holy Land. He felt he had reached absolute perfection, convinced, quite modestly, that he was a total genius. Even though the destruction of Shurjia village was terrifying, he could feel it every single day. The Haoran righteousness within his body was growing stronger, providing a sense of security. This feeling of staying safely tucked away in the starter village was, quite frankly, addictive. Mu eventually sighed, noting that the tragedy at Shurjia village had happened quite a long time ago. He asked why the boy still didn't dare to step outside, but the young man remained terrified. He confessed to having nightmares every night, convinced that the world outside was far too dangerous. In his mind, demonic cultivators were everywhere. Now, we should note this boy is an orphan. Usually, those raised by the community possess great spirit, yet this lone survivor of Shamba village, well, he seemed to be made of much softer stuff. Mu couldn't help but wonder why. He reminded the boy that a scholar cultivates righteousness by acting with calm and integrity. One must fear neither demons nor the powerful. The boy nodded, claiming he had learned his lesson. He looked humble enough, and Mu thought that perhaps he was finally getting through to him. He suggested they go for a walk together, just a simple stroll around the village. But the boy refused to take a single step out of the yard. Mu had taught for decades, and yet he had never encountered such an utterly stubborn coward in all his years. He felt that passing the secret of Haoran righteousness to him was a complete waste of a divine gift. However, news of the village eventually leaked out. A place that had produced 15 individuals with the earthly talent was bound to be noticed by various factions sooner or later. And so, the outsiders began to arrive, asking for the way to Mu's house. It seems everything was about to change, whether our young friend was ready or not. The stranger looked at him with pure disdain, calling him nothing more than a useless waste who couldn't even cultivate. The young man's heart raced as he whispered to Brother Mu that this newcomer was clearly an enemy they couldn't hope to defeat. He told himself that he absolutely must not admit to anything, firmly denying his identity to stay safe. The man, a commander named Chu, presented the 100 battles god-slaying bow and gave him exactly 3 days. If he could master the basics, he would join the elite army. However, if he failed to make progress within those 3 days, the penalty would be death. A simple, brutal ultimatum. He was internally screaming at the sheer lack of logic, wondering how anyone could be so unreasonable. He hadn't even agreed to the deal, yet this man Chu was forcing it upon him, a forced sale if there ever was one. The commander had tossed the cultivation technique to him without a single care or hesitation. Deep down, he was certain that Chu had tampered with the manual, suspecting that within these pages, some kind of hidden virus or trap had been planted, intending to use him as a mere tool. He feared being turned into a human vessel or cannon fodder, cursing the man's incredibly poisonous intentions. If they expected him to do all the hard work just for someone else to reap the rewards, they were dead wrong. Now, his greatest talent was modding cultivation techniques, and he planned to create a new version. He aimed for a God-slaying Bao 2.0 cracked edition, but he quickly realized something was wrong. This technique was in total conflict with his previous Xiantian method and his righteousness art. It was a power born purely for the sake of slaughter, and to be honest, it seemed impossible to modify. Tomorrow was the final deadline set by the commander, and if he didn't learn it, his life was forfeit. He considered running away, but then he paused, wondering what would happen if he truly disappeared. What would become of the village chief and the others? Surely that ruthless man would slaughter the entire village. He decided that if they wouldn't let him live, he would simply have to strike first. The young man might have seemed cowardly, but in this critical moment, he showed a surprising amount of grit. He was actually daring to attempt an assassination on Chu Tianghua, which, to be honest, was a bit reckless. He feared that once he left on this mission, there would be no coming back, a display of pure, foolhardy courage. Such paths rarely end well, and he had heard that the white-robed general was already on the move. For the past 2 days, Chu had been keeping watch atop Mount Mon, clearly waiting for any sign of an escape. The young man whispered to the night that this would be the evening Chu finally met his end. Now, Chu had survived hundreds of battles and was naturally sensitive to the slightest hint of killing intent. Even though the boy outside hadn't made a single sound, his undisguised murderous aura was impossible to miss. In the silence of the dark night, that intent was as obvious as a blazing signal fire. Chu found it almost amusing. He had expected the boy to charge in with a blade for a direct confrontation. Instead, the boy was crouching there trying to poison him with arsenic. A bold move, indeed. So, they were going to play dirty? Well, that was perfectly fine with the commander. The poison was colorless and odorless, and the boy thought that even if he failed, he'd take Chu with him. He wanted them both to perish together, ensuring that neither would walk away from this encounter. In his mind, he was already chanting for the commander's death as he prepared to strike. However, Chu was well prepared, and even when his defenses were tested, he remained unshaken. It was time for the boy to face a technique refined over 3 years, the Great Path dart-throwing hand. The reports had claimed this boy was a useless waste who couldn't cultivate, yet his physical strength was bafflingly high. If Chu hadn't possessed his spiritual aura to shield him, a hand-to-hand struggle might have actually been dangerous. He realized that in this life-and-death struggle, he could very well be beaten to death right then and there. A single moment of hesitation would see him pinned to this mountain forever. It was a matter of survival. It was either him or the boy, but then, Chu tried to pause the madness, suggesting there might be a misunderstanding. But the boy wasn't interested in talk, declaring there was no mistake at all. He had come with one purpose, to kill Chu, and he was ready to throw everything he had into the fight. Chu called him a madman as he took to the air, using his cultivation to fly through the sky. It was an unpredictable move, one that only a Foundation establishment cultivator could truly pull off. Beyond the Tianlong line lay Shunan County, and Chu hoped to reach it quickly. He figured that since the boy didn't have wings, he would eventually be left far behind. But to his frustration, the boy stuck to him like glue, a truly persistent nuisance, to be honest. Chu wondered if the boy's legs ever grew tired, feeling like he was being hunted by a relentless shadow. He really was like a piece of stubborn plaster. Chu couldn't help but marvel at how his legs weren't aching yet. Even when Chu's spiritual energy had been at its peak, the boy had managed to pin him to the ground. Now, after flying for so long, Chu's energy reserves were draining rapidly. Fighting back seemed impossible now, so he decided his only option was to keep running. We see that Muge was a boy who couldn't even read a single word, let alone understand high cultivation. With no spiritual roots in his body, he was the very definition of a useless waste in the eyes of the world. And yet, here he was, actually striking out against a cultivator trained specifically in the art of killing. The outcome of such a bold move was easy to imagine, or so one would think. Suddenly, a voice rang out, demanding to know the identity of the newcomer. Chu called out for Wen Shuai, the divine marshal general, asking if his men were present and ready. Unaware that the Grand Marshal had arrived, the subordinate replied that he would go to report it immediately. Chu didn't care about formalities. He just needed them to know there was a madman right behind him. He desperately ordered them to stop the boy, Shirshi, who was closing in fast. The guards wondered who they were supposed to stop here, deep within the borders of the Southern Kingdom. They looked toward the divine Marshal General, trying to make sense of the chaos. But as they looked closer, they began to wonder if what was approaching was even human at all. Muge finally caught up, gasping that these people were absolutely exhausting him. He told himself that if he hadn't been worried about Chu returning to slaughter Shangba village, he wouldn't be here. He certainly wouldn't have run this literal marathon for any other reason, to be perfectly honest. He asked the guards if they had seen someone flying through the sky just a moment ago. It seemed like a bad joke. After all, this was a man capable of hunting down a divine marshal general. The guards realized that if they tried to stop Shirshi, they would likely be headed for reincarnation very quickly. When Shirshi fights, they figured ordinary mortals should really just focus on staying alive. Muge thanked them and moved on, while rumors began to swirl among the onlookers. Word spread that the divine marshal general had gone into the mountains to steal another man's wife, enraging the husband. An old man even claimed to confirm that the husband had chased him with a blade for 8,000 miles. It seemed the story was true. Chu Tianhua had truly lost all face this time around. The official word was that all of Chu Tianhua's actions were strictly a matter of his own personal conduct. and naturally, his behavior did not represent the official stance of the Southern Kingdom in any way. He was so close. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, he felt a genuine, burning desire to kill. Somehow, he had let his target escape into the capital, having spent the last few days charging forward blindly. Now that he thought about it, rushing headlong into the imperial city was a bit reckless. It was practically a death wish, and he knew he had to be more careful from here on out. He told himself he had to survive, cursing Chu Tianhua for having absolutely no sense of honor. Since Chu couldn't win a fair fight, he had naturally retreated to his home base to call for backup. Suddenly, voices rang out. They had spotted the boy and were determined not to let him escape. It was the classic pattern. After dealing with the small fry, the powerful elders finally decided to show up. They were hunting him down like a machine, led by the formidable and poisonous old Du. He realized he couldn't lead them towards Shuan County, fearing he might bring the wolves right to his own door. If he did, the villagers of Shangba would be doomed, so his only choice was to flee toward the Deadlands. He looked up at the old man hovering in the sky, silently pleading for the elder to just let him go. He jokingly told himself he had elders and children to support, and that he was really just a baby himself. Killing him would be a great sin, he thought, but the old man simply told him to keep shouting. The more he cursed, the more excited the old man became, calmly beginning a countdown to 3. He warned that if the boy kept running, there would be consequences, though he told him not to be afraid. When Chu Tianhua had fled back earlier, he barely had half a life left in him. The old man was surprised the boy still had the energy to run, but he decided he had played enough. It was finally time to capture him and perform a soul search to uncover all his secrets. In that moment, he realized with a jolt of terror that the old man was truly playing for keeps. The old man cried out in disbelief. Somehow, the boy was actually managing to pick up even more speed. He wondered what on earth the kid had been eating to have such stamina, but then he realized something far worse. Directly ahead of them lay the most terrifying forbidden zone in the Southern Kingdom, the abyss of evil spirits. It was a disaster. Without a second thought, the boy charged straight into the depths of the abyss. To enter that place was to embrace certain death, and the old man knew that, for the boy, it was truly all over. Exhausted and gasping for air, the boy realized that the old man had finally stopped his pursuit. He told himself that the world of cultivation was far too dangerous, seemingly crawling with powerful old monsters at every turn. He decided that once he returned to Shangba village, he would hide away and never leave until he was absolutely invincible. But then a paranoid thought struck him. Perhaps the old man was just playing hard to get, waiting for him to lower his guard. He feared it was all a ruse and that a sneak attack was coming at any moment. He knew he had to find a hiding spot immediately, reasoning that the most dangerous place is often the safest. As we follow him deeper, we find a series of inscriptions detailing the tragic lives of those who came before. One story told of a scholar traveling to the capital whose travel funds were stolen, forcing a miserable journey home. He was truly an unlucky man, and his tale was just one of many recorded in this desolate place. Another spent his entire fortune on a legendary halberd, only to test it in water and watch it float like a toy. It was quite the revelation. The poor man had spent his life savings on a useless piece of plastic, or the ancient equivalent. That essentially ended his martial arts career, yet he spent 10 years practicing cultivation to finally soar into the sky. Unfortunately, while he mastered the art of taking off, he never quite figured out how to land. Our protagonist couldn't help but feel for the man. He really was a professional at finding the worst luck possible. Having learned to fly but not to land, the poor soul had quite literally fallen to his death. He thought they were the true geniuses of the cultivation world, in a manner of speaking, and apologized to the fallen brothers of Nanshan. He decided to check on the monsters and borrow their resting place for a moment, feeling he had no other choice. He told himself he would just take a quick look and promise to be as gentle as possible. He asked the former occupant not to blame him as he moved them to a slightly cooler spot. He apologized for the inconvenience, suggesting the shade of the tree would be a nice change of pace for a nap. Meanwhile, a disciple noted to his martial uncle that the wind was strange, as the spiritual incense vanished instantly. The abyss of evil spirits certainly lived up to its reputation. It wasn't a place one entered lightly. The uncle admitted that if he hadn't found a certain ancient scroll, he wouldn't have dared to step foot here. We see them approach some desolate graves, hoping to find shelter from the demonic winds blowing through the valley. The disciple worried that a graveyard might be bad luck, but his uncle assured him it was fine. He reasoned that compared to the ghosts wandering outside, the dead were actually much safer company. Inside the tomb, our protagonist found the space surprisingly large, enough for 2 people to sleep without feeling crowded. The abyss was far too dangerous, and he felt he could finally let his guard down and relax for a moment. Back with the newcomers, the disciple confessed his fear, though his uncle dismissed it as nonsense. He argued they were just old bones that had been dead for ages, hardly capable of getting up to cause trouble. He ordered the boy to rest, as they still had to search for the blood spirit flower the following morning. Suddenly, a voice cried out in a dream, telling someone to stop chasing and calling them shameless. Then came a sharp realization. Someone was pressing down on his hair, followed by a very sudden curse. The disciple froze in terror. It sounded as though someone was actually speaking from inside the coffin. Our hero realized he was sleeping next to someone, and to his absolute shock, it was a woman. In his past life, he used to joke about being grateful for nature's gifts, but it seemed karma had finally caught up with him. He was certain some foul spirit had come to claim his life. The supposed female ghost, however, was actually a very real, very living woman who felt her face turning pale with rage. She cursed her luck, lamenting that her purity was being ruined in such a wretched place. As the world's top ice beauty, she had never even touched a man's hand in all her years of cultivation. And yet, here she was, pinned beneath a beggar. She felt utterly defiled by the situation. She decided there was only one solution. She had to silence him forever. But as she prepared to strike, our hero simply stared back at her. He promptly fainted from the shock, leaving her to scream at him to wake up and face his punishment. She hesitated, wondering how she could possibly bring herself to kill someone in this state. If word got out that she bullied a fainted cheer-refining beggar, her reputation in the cultivation world would be ruined. She told herself it wouldn't have mattered if he were just a corpse, as she had originally thought. But now that he turned out to be a living person, she was left wondering where on earth he had come from. She was mortified at being touched by a beggar, just as her nephew called out to ask if she was all right. She quickly pretended she had an upset stomach, determined not to let the young disciple notice anything was wrong. She claimed she was fine and had simply choked on the heavy winds blowing through the valley. He couldn't help but wonder since when his uncle master had become such a devout believer. She snapped back that he knew nothing, claiming she was merely performing a ritual to guide the local spirits. Meanwhile, our hero woke up thinking it was a mistake to sleep in someone else's grave after having such a vivid nightmare. He had dreamed a female ghost crawled into his bed, a thought that left him feeling chilled to the bone. He told himself this shouldn't be happening, especially since he was a peak cheer-refining cultivator. With his strength, he should have been able to move mountains, yet he couldn't even push open a simple coffin lid. Feeling pathetic, he gave it one final, desperate shove, shouting for the thing to finally open. He felt utterly trapped, convinced that he was surrounded by powerful golden core monsters on all sides. It was a nightmare scenario, ancient monsters in front of him, and a vengeful female ghost locking the door behind him. At this point, he was certain that he was, quite literally, doomed. Meanwhile, the young disciple cheered, telling his uncle master they had finally found the snow spirit flower to save the venerable one. But then he paused, noticing the black cloth his aunt was wearing, and warned her not to tie it so haphazardly. He pointed out that in the secular world, such a black ribbon was only worn by widows mourning their husbands. She snapped back, asking how he could possibly know she hadn't lost a husband, which left the poor boy completely baffled. He wondered to himself when on earth his aunt had managed to get married, let alone become a widow. She looked toward the grave and whispered for her husband to rest in peace, promising she would remain faithful to his memory. The disciple concluded that his aunt must have married in secret and that her beloved had tragically perished right here in the abyss. It explained so much. He realized her cold temperament over the years was likely born from such a heartbreaking loss. He was moved by her deep devotion, while she, internally, was calling our hero a complete scoundrel. She vowed that if she ever discovered his true identity, there would be nowhere for him to hide. Deep down, she promised herself that once she got out of this place, he would pay dearly for what happened. Inside the coffin, our hero heard the commotion and wondered who was outside crying as if they were at a funeral. He felt as though he were being mourned while still alive, repeating his vow to find out who was responsible for this absurdity. He was determined to give them a piece of his mind once he escaped, still annoyed by the mysterious weeping outside. He pleaded for whoever was outside to stop crying and help him move the heavy stone, wondering if they could even hear him. It seemed hopeless. He was facing the very real prospect of being buried alive, and his only path to survival was to break through his current limits and overturn that cursed seal once and for all. However, the abyss of demons was devoid of spiritual energy, containing nothing but an endless supply of destructive death energy and suffocating shadows, which made traditional cultivation impossible. But then a thought occurred to him. Who decided that cultivation required spiritual energy? Why not change the technique? He considered absorbing the surrounding ghost energy, but then he realized that wasn't quite right. If he relied on the energy of the abyss, he would be unable to cultivate the moment he left this dark place. If he was going to rewrite the laws of cultivation, he decided he might as well go all the way. He would modify his technique to absorb the very air itself. And so, we witness a truly historic moment. The world's very first air-absorbing cultivation technique was officially born. This revolutionary method accounted for the periodic table and local atmospheric composition, even utilizing fine dust and pollutants as fuel for his internal growth. It was an absurdly efficient way to bypass the lack of spiritual energy in the abyss. To be honest, even the earth itself would probably shake its head at such a ridiculous concept. But in that moment, he felt like an absolute genius. While others breathed simply to stay alive, every breath he took now made him exponentially stronger. Even in his sleep, the energy would flow into him automatically, fueling his progress without any effort at all. He reflected on how he used to spend 8 hours a day in grueling meditation, which now seemed quite unnecessary. Now, he was operating on a 24-hour cycle, constantly refining energy with every single breath. He felt destined for invincibility, mocking the idea that he lacked a spiritual root for cultivation. He decided to name his unique gift the Void Root, a title that sounded far more impressive than it actually was. It was a root as empty as the very air he breathed, yet it held limitless potential. He cursed those who had called him a little beggar, wishing that same fate upon their entire families. As he processed the strange energy around him, a sudden realization dawned on him regarding that mysterious woman. That night hadn't been a nightmare at all. A woman had actually crawled into his bed while he slept. She had slipped right under his covers, a fact that was as terrifying as it was baffling. He turned his attention to the flying heaven sword art, the very technique belonging to the previous owner. The man had reportedly fallen to his death practicing it, making the manual useless trash in anyone else's hands. But in his hands, it was a divine skill. Where others consumed spiritual chi to fly, he had a different plan. He would simply consume the air, which, to be fair, was much easier to find. With every breath he took, he replenished exactly what he spent, creating a perfect loop of energy. As for the lack of breaks on this technique, well, he figured he would just deal with the trees when he hit them. All he needed now was a proper sword, so he could finally leave this godforsaken place behind. Suddenly, a voice whispered, pleading for him to stay and keep her company in the dark. She claimed to be frightened by the shadows, her voice echoing through the oppressive silence of the abyss. He demanded to know who was hiding in the dark, telling them to show themselves immediately. After all, he was now a powerful cultivator, a human engine of spiritual progress. He was now a being capable of flight, someone even the great general of the Southern Kingdom would have to respect. In his mind, even the most powerful figures would now have to address him respectfully as a fellow Taoist. With such newfound status, he told himself there was no reason to fear a mere ghost in the dark. The voice drifted through the air again, pleading for her dear husband to stay and keep her company. She whimpered about how dark and terrifying the abyss was, sounding quite convincing, to be honest. He took a stand, telling the unseen woman to show some respect, as he wasn't that kind of man. The voice suddenly shifted, snarling that she was actually there to feast on his flesh and drink his blood. She mocked him, asking who could possibly be interested in someone like him anyway. He suddenly panicked, realizing he had mistimed his breathing and taken in far too much air for his technique. The sudden surge of energy was overwhelming, nearly choking him to death on the spot. After regaining his composure and asking around, we learned that he was no longer within the borders of the Southern Kingdom. He was shocked to realize that, in his frantic flight, he had actually managed to cross the national border. He worried if being caught without a passport would lead to him being arrested and deported immediately. Nearby, a herald announced the latest news regarding the upcoming disciple recruitment at the Xiao Sect. It seemed the icy beauty, Tang Kuei, was opening the mountain gates to take in disciples for the very first time. The master of Zumulang Peak had declared they would accept 5 direct disciples with Earth's spiritual roots. A merchant nearby was selling a guide on the Peak Master's preferences for the low price of 3 low-grade spirit stones. Another shout advertised openings for laborers at Manhwa Peak, offering 1 spirit stone per day. The offer was limited to the first 10 people, a rare chance to earn a steady wage in the cultivation world. But as he looked around, he began to realize that something was very strange about this particular street. It seemed that every random person he passed was already at the foundation establishment stage. Back in his hometown, reaching such a level would have made someone a grand master of cultivation. But here, we see that even a common beggar has already attained the foundation establishment stage. Nearby, a father told his son that they truly needed to redouble their efforts in their training. He warned the boy that if he didn't take his cultivation seriously from now on, he wouldn't even be able to compete with a foundation establishment beggar for scraps. Our protagonist blinked in surprise, only to find that someone had suddenly placed a bowl in his hands. He felt a surge of indignation, wondering if they really took him for a beggar. He had his dignity, after all. A passerby explained this wasn't mere charity, but a way to plant seeds of karma with Lady Wanchio. The idea was that once he became successful in the future, he could repay the favor properly. An attendant told the little beggar to stop following them, noting he looked perfectly healthy and capable. He grumbled that people were simply taking advantage of the lady's kind and soft heart. He insisted he was only following to ask for the lady's name, so he could remember her kindness. He told himself that once he struck it rich, it would be much easier to pay her back. And to be perfectly honest, he claimed he wasn't just following her for the sake of a chicken leg. He offered his sincere thanks to the lady for her incredible generosity and open heart. He wished her a life of peace and safety, which was the least he could do under the circumstances. He realized that no matter where one goes, it is impossible to take a single step without money. In that quiet moment, he found himself unexpectedly missing the life he had left behind. He thought of Annie's son, who used to bring him fresh steamed buns every single day. He even missed Annie Zhao, who was always nagging him to finally go out and find a wife. He thought of the elderly and the weak who used to call him Zhongdi, and decided right then to find a master. He vowed to earn a fortune and return home in glory, dressed in the finest silks. He whispered a promise to Shangba village to wait for him, for he would surely return. Meanwhile, an examiner remarked that in all his years, he had seen many with mixed or useless spiritual roots. But this was the very first time he had encountered someone who didn't emit a single spark of light, a person completely devoid of a spiritual root. There was only one possible explanation for such a void. When the boy was just a newborn, someone must have used a cruel and powerful method to strip it away. If spiritual roots could truly be stolen like that, it raised a terrifying possibility. Wouldn't that mean every talented young genius with exceptional potential was in grave danger? The examiner noted that stealing a spiritual root comes at a massive cost to the perpetrator. Furthermore, once the root leaves its original body, its spiritual essence drains away rapidly. Even most demonic cultivators wouldn't bother with it, but our protagonist refused to accept this. He told himself he was a master of machinery, so there was no way he could be lacking a spiritual root. Nearby, a woman watched him, feeling that this mud-covered man seemed strangely familiar. She felt as though she had seen him before, perhaps even shared an intimate connection in the past. Shaking off the thought, she told her companion, Yahello, to go and call the young man over. Yahello thought her martial aunt had finally moved on, even if the boy she picked out seemed to be nothing more than a talentless nobody. Not that it mattered, of course. As long as her aunt could overcome the pain of losing her husband, she didn't mind the choice. Even keeping a useless man around as eye candy would be fine. Yahello then approached the immortal lady. Our protagonist, quite annoyed, asks why he was called over when he was busy with the Sect entrance exams. He mutters that a beautiful woman like her is just wasting his time, which, to be honest, is a bold thing to say. She asks if he is dissatisfied with her, to which he quickly backtracks, asking what kind of talk that is. He explains that his family are simple farmers, and looking at such a beauty for too long might give him styes. She wonders if he is praising or insulting her, and demands to know who gave him the audacity to speak so freely. She declares that she is Tankaway, the master of the 100 flowers, and asks if he dares to challenge her. When she asks if he will join her sect, he simply replies that he only came here to enjoy the spectacle. Seeing his arrogance, she decides she must take him in, if only to slowly torment him later on. He pauses, asking if becoming her disciple comes with any snacks or if room and board are included. She offers 10 low-grade spirit stones a month, noting that outer disciples usually only receive 5. He realizes that even laborers only get 1. 10 stones is a massive fortune for someone in his position. Without a second thought, he bows deeply, formally accepting her as his master right then and there. Tankaway is stunned that her prestigious reputation as the Ice Mountain Sword Immortal meant so little. It turns out her legendary status wasn't nearly as persuasive as 10 measly spirit stones. She feels like the world might as well end, while he suddenly worries he agreed a bit too quickly. He fears his new master might regret the high price, so he quickly tries to prove his worth. He assures her he can handle the kitchen, the garden, the fields, and even the cattle without any trouble. He insists that 10 spirit stones is a bargain for someone with his diverse set of skills. He goes on, claiming he can cook spirit food, tend spirit fields, and even raise spirit beasts for her. He keeps insisting it's a fair deal, though it sounds more like he's trying to hustle a fool. Tankaway sighs, asking if he really thinks adding the word spirit to every chore is enough to impress her. She looks at the young man and decides to let it go. After all, he is quite the character. She tells herself that, if nothing else, she has at least recruited a decent laborer for the fields. She calls out to Yahello to leave, confirming the deal is set at 120 stones a year. But a moment later, we see him standing alone, wondering where on earth everyone went. He realizes with a start that his new boss has seemingly abandoned him on his very first day of work. For half a month, he wanders through the vast territory of the Xiaoyao sect, searching for his new home. Despite his best efforts, he simply cannot find which way the gates of the 100 Flowers Peak open. Eventually, he approaches an elder, politely asking for directions to the elusive peak. He introduces himself as Tang Kuei's top disciple, only to be asked what beggar has wandered into their midst. The elder scoffs, telling him the 100 Flowers Peak never accepts male disciples and ordering him to get lost. He begins to wonder if he has accidentally fallen for a shell company scam in the cultivation world. He realizes this isn't Shangba village anymore. He has no house to call his own here. With no fields to till and no snacks to eat, he finds himself completely lost in this great city. Without even a place to stay, he decides he must find a job to secure some kind of local residency. A shopkeeper asks if he knows how to take orders or identify rare spirit herbs. He admits he doesn't, but proudly claims he is a master at farming who can guarantee a record-breaking harvest. The response is immediate. They have no need for a simple farmer, and he is told to move along. He grumbles about how farming is a legitimate skill, eventually finding a place looking for a guard. They ask for a local reference. He has none, but boasts that he is a powerful foundation establishment cultivator. He demonstrates his strength by smashing a rock with a single punch, but in this city, such displays are common enough to be ignored. Without a guarantor, the guards suspect he might be a demonic spy and tell him to get lost immediately. He even tries his hand at washing dishes, but that ends in a series of unfortunate accidents and broken plates. Next, a potential employer asks him to present his cultivation world integrity qualification jade plate. He stares back blankly, having absolutely no idea what an integrity qualification even is. The shopkeeper scoffs, calling him an undocumented vagrant without any credentials and ordering him to leave. It seems that without that specific jade plate, he is nothing more than a ghost in this society. Before entering the cultivation world, he truly believed his strength meant he could handle any job imaginable. But after facing the harsh reality of society, he realizes that aside from farming, he has no marketable skills at all. He looks up at the vast, indifferent sky, wondering why the heavens are being so particularly cruel to him today. Eventually, he finds himself reduced to pleading with the kind-hearted brothers, sisters, and aunts passing by on the street. He announces to anyone listening that he is the top disciple of Tankaway, the master of the 100 Flowers Peak. He claims his master ran away and his boss owes him back pay, begging the crowd for just a small bite to eat. The locals point and laugh, mocking the beggar who claims to be the student of the famous Ice Mountain Fairy. They find it pitiful that a man claiming to be at the foundation establishment stage has fallen this low. To them, his story is just a desperate lie told for a scrap of food, and they don't hesitate to judge him openly. At first, his face turned bright red with shame, but after 3 days of hunger, pride became a luxury he couldn't afford. He begs an old man for a donation, promising that the great disciple of 100 Flowers Peak will bless his future prosperity. Deep down, he tells himself that once he saves enough for travel, he'll leave this miserable place behind and go home. He misses Shangba village dearly, remembering a time when he was always warm, well-fed, and far more respected. He thinks back to Aunt Zhao, who was always trying to find him a wife, and curses this so-called carefree sect. To be honest, he feels this 100 Flowers Peak isn't even fit for a dog to stay at. A servant calls him a dead beggar, mentioning that their mistress is only feeding him out of the kindness of her heart. She asks why he keeps lingering around their house every single day, as if he were clocking into a job. He calls her a little fairy, claiming that her family is the only one with a shred of kindness left in this city. He tells himself that by accepting their food, he is simply helping the mistress accumulate good merit for her soul. We see him look down at a meal of meat, vegetables, and even a succulent chicken drumstick. He realizes that even during the new year back in Shangba village, he never ate a meal quite this grand. The servant looks at him, wondering what kind of person he truly is beneath the grime. She points out that since he is supposedly a foundation establishment cultivator, he should be a powerful figure in the mortal world, a true master of his own domain. She asks how on earth he managed to end up in such a miserable and pathetic state. He laments that in this wretched city, there isn't a single job available for someone who knows how to farm. The alchemy shops didn't want him, and the security firms refused to hire anyone without proper credentials. Even the simple task of washing dishes required a level of certification he simply didn't possess. He wonders if the entire purpose of his cultivation journey was just to become a beggar in the big city. He insists that he truly tried his best, searching everywhere for any kind of honest work. The servant tells him not to cry, warning him to leave before the mistress returns and sees him like this. He decides he can't remain this depressed any longer, setting a firm goal for himself today, no matter what. He tells himself that he must find a job, any job, as long as it provides a roof and a meal. He tells himself that he absolutely cannot bring shame to the folks back home in Shangba village. Our protagonist, Muge, makes a solemn vow right then and there that when he next returns to this door, it will be to repay their kindness, and certainly not to beg for another meal. He declares that if he breaks this oath, his master, whom he has never even met, should be struck down. Yes, he actually wishes for his master to be hit by 5 bolts of lightning and die a miserable death. Feeling much better after making such a vicious oath, he prepares to face the city of Chosian once more. Meanwhile, back at the sect, a woman laments how her husband left this world so abruptly and elegantly. He simply closed his eyes and was buried alive, leaving her behind in this state. She weeps over her fate, playing the part of a poor, abandoned widow to perfection. She cries out, wondering how on earth she is supposed to go on living like this. Suddenly, a disciple rushes in, shouting that something terrible has happened to the martial ant. He reports that the new disciple she just took in has actually gone down the mountain to beg for food. The news is spreading everywhere, and people are starting to talk about the state of their peak. The rumor mill in Chosian City is already buzzing with claims that 100 Flowers Peak mistreats its disciples. She is outraged that a useless boy with a plum forest root would dare use their name to beg for scraps. Calling him a dog who ruins the sect's reputation, she prepares to head down and clear out the trash. But she stops herself, realizing that if she leaves now, the elaborate act she's been putting on will be ruined. To protect her reputation as the world's #1 ice beauty, her widow persona must remain intact. She goes back to her performance, wailing about how bitter and cruel her life has become. After all, a grieving widow in the cultivation world can't just go wandering outside whenever she pleases. She reminds herself that these are the rules left behind by her ancestors. After all, for the sake of her late husband's soul in heaven, she must maintain her mourning. And so, she decides she has no choice but to temporarily let that little brat off the hook. Watching from the side, the disciples are left wondering exactly what kind of performance this is. Their martial aunt's dramatic wailing is, to be honest, a bit too loud for comfort. The poor boy is completely lost, unable to understand the scene unfolding before him. Meanwhile, Muge tells himself that if one place won't have him, another surely will. We see that he has finally found a job with excellent pay that includes both room and board. Granted, this particular position requires very specific physical conditions and professional standards. But as it turns out, he fits the requirements perfectly, or so he thinks. A woman approaches, inviting him to play, noting that he must be the new boy in town. He tells her to have some self-respect, realizing he's accidentally walked into a very different kind of establishment. He reminds himself that he is a transmigrated genius and the top disciple of 100 Flowers Peak. He wonders how he could possibly associate with such fallen and degenerate customers. Our hero, Nuo, declares that even if he starves to death, he will never sell his body. He tells the lady he only sells his talents, though she claims she's heard that line far too often. She notes that everyone who arrives here starts off saying they only want to show off their skills. As for him, however, she seems to have a very specific role in mind. It's a big contract, and as the saying goes, enough money can make even a ghost turn a grindstone. With enough spirit stones, he'll do anything, quickly praising the lady for her excellent eye for talent. He tells her that if it's just accompanying guests for drinks, he's an expert, and happily invites his dear sister inside. We see that he possesses a handsome face and a tall, upright figure that certainly catches the eye. Most importantly, he is quick to cast aside his pride the moment he sees a bit of profit, a rare talent indeed. The lady realizes he is a promising seed, someone truly worth cultivating for her business. The following day, she makes it a point to publicly praise the newcomer, Muge, in front of everyone. On his very first day, he managed to handle an extremely difficult VIP client without breaking a sweat. She calls for a round of applause, and to be honest, he seems to be enjoying the attention quite a bit. Muge acts humble, telling Sister Lee that she is far too kind with her compliments. He tells himself he isn't actually that excellent, though his playful tone suggests he might believe otherwise. Sister Lee then addresses the group, telling them that regarding today's earnings, they should keep an extra 10% of the spirit stones to buy medicine and nourish their bodies. She asks Muge to stay behind for a moment, leading him to wonder if he's about to receive some special treatment. He is thrilled to be noticed by the big boss on day one. This career advancement is moving at a satisfying speed. He asks Sister Lee for her instructions, declaring he would go through fire and water for her without hesitation. She tells him that her judgment of people is never wrong, and that he has the potential to be a grass sunflower. Confused, Muge asks what that is, noting he's only heard of legendary heroes, which earns him a laugh and a call of silly boy. She explains that while the top female escort is called a flower sunflower, the top male is naturally a grass sunflower. She asks if he understands now, making sure the path ahead of him is perfectly clear. She plans to package and brand him as the #1 immortal male model in the entire territory of the Xiaoyao sect. He will be specifically marketed to high-end, wealthy female clients, frequenting only the most prestigious establishments. Good heavens, we knew Sister Lee had ambition, but we didn't realize it was quite this vast. She truly intends to transform him into the top male model of the entire cultivation world. But Muge has his reservations, and he looks at Sister Lee with a bit of hesitation. Deep down, he tells himself he only wants to earn enough travel money to return home and farm. He thinks of his childhood friends and his childhood sweetheart back in the village. They might all become great emperors of this cultivation world one day, and if he takes this job, he worries he might ruin their reputations by association. A valid concern, in his mind. He fears they won't be able to hold their heads high in the future, which is indeed a problem. Sister Lee wonders where this silly boy got 15 future emperors as friends. He must still be dreaming. She reassures him, calling him Little Moo and telling him he has absolutely nothing to worry about. She reminds him that making money in this industry isn't shameful, and Muge finds himself agreeing. He repeats that making money isn't shameful, but then another thought strikes him as he looks at her. He asks if his master might expel him if he found out, prompting Sister Lee to ask who his master is. He mentions Tankaway, the master of 100 Flowers Peak, which sounds like a massive joke to her. She is stunned, wondering if he could truly be the disciple of the ice fairy, Tankaway. If the master knew she was tricking his disciple into this trade, her establishment would be leveled by arrows. She quickly tells him to stop overthinking things and focus on the task at hand. In short, starting tomorrow, she wants him to study music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. The plan is for him to follow the path of a high-end, refined young nobleman. Suddenly, someone rushes in shouting for Sister Lee. It seems a very troublesome guest has arrived. The news is grim. Zhang Jinjin has been beaten, and the culprit has such a powerful background that even the security guards can't restrain them. Sister Lee is stunned. In this line of work, danger lurks at every step, but usually, they know how to handle the male guests. Normally, they would just send the top beauty, Zhao Dingling, to smooth things over with a bit of charm. If things truly went south, Sister Lee felt she could step in personally and settle the matter herself. However, dealing with a female guest who possesses a deep and influential background is a different story entirely. She realizes she is missing a top-tier talent for this specific situation, and her eyes land right on young Muge. It seems this establishment has reached its most perilous moment yet, and the tension is palpable. She tells him that the time has come to test his mettle, and Muge, surprisingly, doesn't blink. He tells her to leave it to him and to rest easy. To be honest, he's quite confident in his own abilities. He claims that back in Shangba village, there wasn't a single problem that he couldn't solve once he stepped in. No matter who is waiting inside, he believes his silver tongue and peerless looks will be more than enough. He is certain he can win them over, asking what could possibly make this distinguished guest dissatisfied. He tells the guest to bring all their complaints directly to him, but then he sees her, and his heart stops. It's Xiao Tuer. She is just as shocked, calling him Brother Nyor, and asking why on earth he is dressed like that. Now, we see a classic situation. Meeting an old friend in a far-off place should be a joyous occasion. But as we can all imagine, when that reunion happens inside a brothel, the mood shifts rather drastically. The situation turns even more sour when the reality of the moment truly sinks in for him. She is the high-ranking VIP customer who has come here to spend money and cause a scene. And he, much to his own horror, is the male model who has been sent out to provide her with service. He is at a total loss. On his very first trip out, his companions seem determined to make life difficult. Imagine the scene. She has come to a brothel to drink and enjoy herself, only to end up on the metaphorical big screen. And then, she is caught red-handed by Brother Nyor from her own village. If word of this ever reaches home, she wonders how she could ever show her face in Mineshan again. It simply cannot happen. However, Muge considers himself an experienced man of the world, and in this moment of social death, he knows he must act. He believes that whoever speaks first loses, so he decides he must seize the initiative immediately. He chooses to turn the tables on her. Well now, Xiao Tuer, he begins with an air of authority. You've only been away practicing cultivation for 3 years, and instead of learning virtue, you've learned how to frequent brothels. He warns her that if the village elder found out she came to such a place for entertainment, he would surely break her legs. Terrified, Xiao Tuer begs him to listen to her explanation. She insists it isn't what he thinks, but he simply covers his ears, refusing to hear a single word. He declares that he will tell the elder regardless, and that her tears won't change a thing, which is a bit harsh, really. He even goes as far as calling her a wicked woman for being there, leaving poor Xiao Tuer in a state of panic. She explains that she is representing the flying immortal Holy Land to exchange knowledge with the little demon sect. According to her, this is all just a standard part of the hospitality and social etiquette in the cultivation world. But then, a realization hits her. She wonders why on earth she is the one feeling guilty here. After all, he is the one who actually works in this establishment. She stops him, asking why he is even here in the first place, and more importantly, why he is dressed in such a gaudy and ridiculous fashion. At that moment, Muge realizes he has a problem. He had almost forgotten that he was here to sell his charms. Greetings, valued guest, he says, shifting back into character. I am Muge, the top treasure of the fragrant house, and I am here to be at your service. Xiao Tuer looks at him skeptically and notes that Brother Nyor doesn't seem particularly happy to be serving her. He quickly retorts that he wouldn't dare feel that way, as she is a guest here for official business, or so she claims. He reminds her that he is simply here to work, though we can see this unexpected encounter has already shaken him. Deep down, he feels he has lost this battle so thoroughly that he has nothing left to hide, not even his dignity. He mutters that he will settle the score with her back home, addressing her formally as junior sister Immortal to her. Just then, Brother Zhu chimes in, asking who this young man dressed in such refreshing and revealing attire might be. Xiao Tuer introduces him as her good-for-nothing older brother, raised on the same milk, and asks Zhu to excuse the embarrassment. Zhu replies that it is no embarrassment at all, realizing he is looking at his future brother-in-law. A bold assumption, really. Muge thinks to himself that if it isn't an embarrassment, Zhu should probably stop snickering behind his hand. The senior disciples decide it is time to head out, leaving Xiao Tuer behind as they take their leave. She explains that she still has a few private matters to discuss with her dear brother before she can join them. And so, this difficult group of distinguished guests is finally handled, thanks to Muge's quick thinking. His colleagues remark that Muge was born for this line of work, possessing a natural talent that will surely lead to great things. Once they are alone, Muge explains that he simply went on a long journey and couldn't find his way back home. He claims he accidentally ended up in this city of immortals and took this job just to save enough money for the trip back. He emphasizes that it was all completely unintentional, a likely story, to be perfectly honest. Xiao Tuer asks him if he has any idea just how far away this place is from their home in Mineshan. She points out that even 10 flying boats would take half a month to cover the distance, so he shouldn't tell her that he actually traveled all this way on his own 2 legs, to which he simply replies, yes, I did. He insists he ran the whole way using nothing but his feet, and in that moment, he realizes he is completely doomed. Xiao Tuer sighs, convinced that since her brother's mind was never his strongest suit, he must have begged his way across the lands. To her, the entire situation is simply too pitiful for words. She reaches out and hands him 50 high-grade spirit stones, hoping this will be enough to end his suffering. She tells him it is plenty to book the most luxurious flying boat back to the Southern Kingdom, bless his soul. She reminds him that home is in Shunan County, Southern Kingdom, and begs him not to forget it. She warns him that if he gets lost, he must ask for directions, and if he encounters bandits or villains, he shouldn't be stingy with the money. He should just give them the stones, because once a robber has the cash, they won't bother arguing with a fool, which, in her mind, is exactly how he is being perceived. Muge looks at her, calling out her name, Xiao to her, with a look of utter disbelief. He asks her if she has perhaps misunderstood the extent of his actual strength and abilities. He tries to explain that he is currently at the foundation building stage, but she tells him to shut up and listen. She instructs him to divide the stones into 3 parts, one hidden in his hair and another sewn into his underwear. The last portion should be hung at his waist as bait, a tactical masterclass, in her own estimation. She tells him to stay put and not move while she goes to find someone in charge. She insists he wait right there while she tracks down the manager of this establishment. She spots a staff member and calls her over, addressing her firmly as Fairy. He asked if there were any further instructions regarding the one called Muge Shishue. She asks if that ridiculous name was her idea, and the woman admits it was, as is custom in their line of work. She explains that everyone who enters this profession must take on a stage name for the guests. When asked how he ended up here, the woman recalls seeing him wandering the streets just a few days ago. She explains that she saw him wrapped in a tattered quilt, begging for scraps, and simply couldn't bear the sight of it. Once this young man, Neza, was washed and dressed, he turned out to be far too handsome for his own good. Xiao Tuer leans in and tells the woman to listen closely. Muge is her elder brother, and she is protective. She reveals that she is a successor of the Zhanjian sword from the flying, immortal Holy Land. And she isn't the only one. She informs the woman that Muge has many other siblings just like her. He has 15 of them, to be exact, and every single one possesses the potential of a great emperor. She explains that she has urgent business to attend to and must leave immediately. But she warns that if her brother loses so much as a single hair while staying there will be consequences. She threatens to bury the entire city of Chioxian alongside them, feeling that her brother Nyoer is far too pitiful. She vows that once he leaves, she will return with reinforcements to tear this establishment down to the ground. The staff member, unfazed, simply tells her to visit often and reminds her to sign up for a VIP membership. The woman is left reeling, thinking of the Zhanjian successor and those 15 legendary siblings backing him up. The titles alone are terrifying, leaving her to wonder what kind of divine background this man truly has. She finds the whole situation incredibly tragic, almost too pitiful to believe, really. To her, it is a display of pure, unadulterated misery that tugs at her very heartstrings. It is as if a fallen immortal has descended into the mortal realm only to suffer. She realizes now why that high and mighty sword successor was so moved by him. The moment she saw Muge Shishue, she was completely captivated by his apparent plight. She was even willing to use the threat of 15 elite geniuses just to ensure his safety. With such peerless looks and a background that reaches the heavens, his story is only getting started. The woman realizes that her establishment, the Piaoxiang Pavilion, is about to produce a true dragon among men. She turns to Muge, explaining that if he wants to make real money in the service industry, he must learn the art of self-packaging, because every high-end product needs a soul. He needs a unique identity. After all, without a special hook, no one is willing to pay a premium price. She uses Zhang Jinjin as an example, asking Muge what he feels when he hears that name. Muge admits the name sounds like someone incredibly wealthy, but she scoffs, noting the man spends every cent he earns. He wastes it all on tonics to maintain his appearance, and she warns Muge not to follow that path. Instead, they will take the high-end route, though, to be honest, that path is far more difficult to walk. Mastering music, chess, and calligraphy is just the baseline. He must become truly multi-talented. It just so happens the pavilion has a master of the zither named Zhao Dingning, who is more than just a star performer. She is actually a hidden nascent soul chess master, a revelation that leaves Muge quite stunned. A figure of that caliber could easily be an elder in the Xiaoyao sect, yet here she is. They wonder if she is in. The woman announces she has brought Muge to learn the zither, and a voice invites Sister Li to enter. The sheer pressure in the room is immense, befitting a nascent soul master. Muge remembers the first rule of the trade. One must always bring a gift to build a good relationship with a senior. He addresses her as Sister Dingning, presenting her with a small token as a formal gift for his apprenticeship. However, the woman pulls him aside, whispering that he's been cheated because the gold on the bracelet is just a thin plating. She suspects the inside is nothing but raw iron, but Muge remains perfectly calm, insisting he wasn't cheated at all. He explains that the shopkeeper told him it was iron, and he even spent a long time haggling for a lower price. Sister Dingning looks at him, wondering if Muge is perhaps a bit more desperate for money than he let on. Muge insists he isn't short on funds at all, mentioning that Xiaodu just gave him 50 high-grade spirit stones yesterday. Upon hearing he has 50 high-grade spirit stones, the atmosphere in the room shifts instantly. Dingning is incredulous that, despite his wealth, he chose to buy her a broken iron bracelet worth only a few pennies. He wonders what this woman is planning. It feels as though she's looking for a reason to end him right then and there. Sister Lee quickly tries to intervene, nervously telling Dingning that Muge simply made a mistake with the gift. Dingning produces a real gift, though she tells Sister Lee that she doesn't actually lack such material things. What she really wanted was a proper show of respect, but instead, she watches Muge with growing irritation. She is absolutely fuming because he is guarding his money bag as if she were a common thief. Muge recalls Xiaodu's warning. If anyone tries to rob him, the bag on his waist is just a decoy. He is determined to protect his true savings at all costs, even if it means putting his life on the line. Dingning fumes, thinking she has never been treated with such utter disrespect in her entire life. If Sister Lee hadn't personally begged her for this favor, she wouldn't want anything to do with this difficult young man. Finally, she relents, telling him to come over so she can begin teaching him the art of rhythm and music. We often hear that those who master music possess a refined and gentle nature, yet Sister Dingning seems to have missed that particular memo with her explosive temper. He wonders aloud if she lacks actual skill, a comment that sends Dingning into a cold, sharp fury. She calls out for Aya to bring her zither immediately, her patience having reached its absolute limit. She decides that today, she will play a piece specifically for Muge to settle the matter once and for all. She wants to show him exactly how unskilled she is, and while the start was rocky, the plan is working. Sister Lee watches on, realizing that Muge is actually quite brilliant at manipulating people's emotions. He has successfully goaded a master into teaching him with her full effort, which was his goal all along. Even a powerhouse like Dingning has been completely reeled in by his clever provocations. She begins her lesson by explaining that the true essence of the zither lies in its spirit. A true master of melody doesn't just play notes. They use the rhythm to calm the very soul. Through music, one can communicate with nature itself and glimpse the profound secrets of the great Tao. She introduces her signature piece, the echo of all things, the very song that made her famous. She challenges him to feel the natural world through her music and see if he can truly understand it. She boasts that back when she was a mere beginner, she could replicate a melody after hearing it only once. Now, she wants to see exactly how much natural talent Muge actually possesses. As he takes his place, his intense aura makes her wonder if he might be a hidden grandmaster of music. But as soon as he begins, she shouts for him to stop, asking what on earth that horrible noise was. She describes it as nothing but chaotic static, but Muge looks at Sister Dingning with genuine confusion. He argues that he was simply following her lead, moving his fingers fast and narrowing his eyes just like she did. He explains how he tilted his chin up and maintained a calm, composed expression throughout the performance. He even tried to capture that specific look of profound mystery, certain his imitation was absolutely perfect. Dingning is speechless, realizing that while she was playing a masterpiece meant to connect with the heavens, he failed to learn a single actual musical note from her entire performance. Instead, he spent the whole time studying her dramatic poses and her cool stage presence. She tries again, telling him to watch her hands this time instead of staring at her face. He nods, noting that he must keep his back straight and, halfway through the song, look up to sweep his gaze across the audience with eyes that show exactly 3 parts loneliness. And, of course, exactly 4 parts indifference. To be honest, his attention to detail is quite misplaced. At this point, Dingning snaps, shouting that he is utterly unteachable and telling him to get out. She declares that if he cannot play properly, he won't be getting a single bite to eat. She insists he is wrong and demands to know why he hasn't memorized the musical score as instructed. She looks at his notes in disbelief, asking what kind of absolute nonsense he has actually written down. She curses her luck, lamenting that a grand master of her stature has been reduced to this. She wonders what sins she committed in a past life to end up with such a hopeless disciple. Muge, however, remains calm and asks Sister Dingning if there might be another possibility. He suggests, with a straight face, that perhaps the problem lies with the instrument itself. He argues that the strings are clearly out of alignment, making it the zither's fault, not his. When she asks why her playing was perfect, he simply tells her it's because she was playing it wrong. She is nearly speechless, outraged that the greatest zither master in Choseon City is being lectured. She can't believe this amateur has the audacity to tell her that her technique is flawed. As punishment, she decrees that he won't sleep until he has played the piece perfectly 100 times. But then, the tension is broken as someone rushes in, shouting that something terrible has happened. We learn that an incredibly arrogant and powerful figure has arrived at the front courtyard. The young mistress is being overwhelmed, and the message is clear: the situation is urgent. They need Muge to provide immediate backup before things spiral out of control. We see a side of the elegant and beautiful courtesan of Piaoxiang Mansion that we haven't seen before. In her state of pure, unbridled fury, she is barely recognizable as the graceful woman from moments ago. We see her looking less like a graceful musician and more like a ferocious beast ready to devour someone. The messenger gasps that the situation in the front courtyard is desperate and requires Sister Dingning's immediate attention. She mentions that Muge has his own unique strengths and should be the one to save the day, whatever those strengths may be. Li Qingqiu is skeptical, wondering if there's been a mistake, as even a seasoned veteran like Zhao Jinjin couldn't handle this. If a top-tier courtesan failed with such a high-end client, she doubts this dim-witted fellow stands any chance at all. Muge, however, is offended, arguing that he has spent the last half-month doing nothing but eating, sleeping, and practicing. He insists that he hasn't just been paying for lessons. He has truly grasped the ultimate essence of the zither. Dingning scoffs, telling him he knows absolutely nothing about the path of music, using rather colorful language to say so. She repeats her blunt assessment, convinced that he hasn't understood a single thing about the soul of the instrument. When asked who this important guest is, the messenger informs Sister Dingning of the visitor's high status. It is the fairy Yu Linglong, master of Shinying Peak, accompanied by the great scholar of Jinqiu Academy. Mr. Wanwan is also there, and Dingning decides that while Yu Linglong has a fiery temper, she won't kill without reason. Furthermore, the Jinqiu Academy prides itself on noble spirit and righteous energy, which usually means they are quite civil. They focus on virtue, so she assumes Wanwan won't do anything too terrible to the boy. Probably. She tells him to negotiate well and not embarrass her, though she quickly realizes a much more important rule. She warns him that under no circumstances is he to tell anyone that she was the one who taught him. Then, she kicks him out. Muge remains undeterred, boldly promising his master that his name will soon be known throughout the world. His companion, however, is worried, knowing exactly how little progress he has actually made over the last 2 weeks. She suggests that if he still hasn't mastered the zither, he should perhaps avoid talking about music entirely once inside. She even suggests he follow Zhao Jinjin's example. Perhaps he could just take off his robe and try dancing instead. She tells him that with his peerless looks, he is surely 100 times more attractive than Zhao Jinjin. At that point, she reasons, those two powerful guests won't be able to take their eyes off him. Even a scholar, she thinks, would surely fall for a young man as handsome as our protagonist. Muge tells Ayan not to worry, insisting he can conquer the room without needing to take off a single stitch of clothing. Back inside, Dingning is still fuming, swearing that she won't repeat herself a final time. She warns him once more that when he is out there, he must never mention she was his teacher. If he does, she promises to personally break his legs, and she certainly looks like she means it. In the courtyard, the manager apologizes to Fairy Yu and Mr. Wanwan, explaining that Jinjin is feeling unwell. He expresses his deepest regrets for the disturbance and the delay in their entertainment. To make up for it, he has arranged for the establishment's newest top-tier talent to step in. He introduces the young man as Muge Shishue, who is now ready to serve them. Lately, the Piaoxiang courtyard has been aggressively promoting their new elite program to the public. They have been handing out flyers all over the streets to drum up excitement. The name Muge Shishue is mentioned frequently in those advertisements, building quite a reputation. The flyers claim he is incredibly handsome and possesses unparalleled artistic talent. The guests are curious, wondering exactly what kind of special skills this Muge Shishue actually possesses. The manager explains that the courtyard recently invested heavily to create the 4 immortal gods, starting with Muge Shishue. The group includes Mufeng Weiniang, Fian Xiehua, and Zhijing Tianju, quite the poetic lineup. Each of them specializes in one of the 4 arts, the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. And Muge Shishue, we are told, is the one who has mastered the profound essence of the zither. He is, after all, the top disciple of the great fairy Zhao Dingling, and his skill with the zither is said to be peerless. Muge steps forward with a graceful bow, offering his greetings to the assembled fairies. He mentions that having heard they were discussing the way, he has come specifically to offer them a song. The guests are immediately impressed, noting that as one of the 4 immortals, his presence and aura are truly remarkable. To be honest, they find his demeanor surprisingly human and grounded for such a renowned talent. One guest admits that while she doesn't quite understand the complexities of melody, she is still moved. She feels a raw power and wildness in the music, claiming to be a true connoisseur of the instrument. And yet, we see something truly unusual. It is likely the first time anyone has seen a man play the zither with only one hand. He leans casually against the instrument, peeling and eating grapes while his fingers dance across the strings. It is a scene of complete ease and relaxation, radiating a sense of natural, uninhibited freedom. The guests marvel at his incredibly high state of mind, though one of them begins to feel a strange sense of recognition. She wonders why he looks more familiar the longer she watches him, as if they had met somewhere before. She searches her memory, trying to place exactly where that might have been. The applause breaks out, with guests agreeing that as Dingling's disciple, his performance is nothing short of magnificent. The music is full of strength, and they turn to Wanwan, the resident intellectual, to ask for her refined opinion. Wanwan finds it exceptional, though she notes that Master Muge plays with such incredible speed that it's hard to keep up. His fingerwork is unlike anything she has ever seen, and she admits she couldn't memorize much of the score. She asks if he would be willing to play the piece once more, and Muge naturally agrees to the request. But something has changed. While the emotion remains just as violent and wild, the melody itself has shifted. The notes and the very content are entirely different, prompting her to listen intently from beginning to end once again. Wanwan speaks up, pointing out that this simply isn't the same piece of music at all. She questions him directly, noting that what he is playing now compared to what he played before doesn't seem to be the same melody, though Muge insists with a smile that it is. She is confused, wondering how the two versions could sound so completely different to her ears. Deep down, Muge is sweating. He realizes this woman is far more perceptive than he anticipated. He wonders how she could possibly have such a sharp ear for detail, having caught the discrepancies so easily. To be honest, he can't even remember what he played the first time, but he knows he must keep his cool. When in doubt, he decides to retreat into the lofty heights of philosophy, addressing her as Master Wanwan. He pauses, looking at her intently before asking a single, pointed question. He asks her if there are any two leaves in this entire world that are exactly the same. When she admits there aren't, he explains that it's the same with his music. One version was for then, and this version is for now. Naturally, they must be different. He claims that because the wind has shifted, the clouds have moved, and his own inner state has changed. The wind is fickle and the clouds are fleeting. If he played a third time, it would change yet again. Because all things are in a state of flux, he tells her, and that is the essence of the way. The guests ponder his words. No two leaves are the same, and the elements themselves are ever-changing. Everything in existence is shifting, and every moment brings a new variation of the truth. It seems he is using the sound of the zither to simulate the very laws of heaven and earth. Wanwan is deeply moved, admitting that Master Muge's state of mind is as vast as the mountains. Muge humbly suggests she is overpraising him, but seeing that they are all so pleased, he continues. Muge smiles and tells the ladies that he will continue to play a few more random notes for them. Actually, he corrects himself. He will play another piece, one as wild as a raging wind. Meanwhile, we see that Sister Dingling has been thinking for a long time, worried that Muge might ruin her reputation. She specifically sent Aya to check on the situation, prepared to come in person if things went south. It seems she was ready to personally clear out the house if necessary, as Aya observes the scene. Aya is told to go back and inform Sister Dingling that the guests are actually very satisfied with the performance. Even the music masters of Shinying Peak and Master Wanwan have nothing but high praise for Muge's zither skills. Aya finds this impossible to believe, knowing full well just how terrible his playing usually is. She is shocked to hear they were even discussing the great way inside. To her, his skills are non-existent. In her eyes, he is relying entirely on his good looks and a carefully crafted aura of mystery to get by. With the prestigious title of Dingling's disciple backing him, he could probably play like absolute garbage. And these powerful figures would still claim to hear the supreme truths of the universe in it. Muge, however, feels that his performance today has been a resounding success, which, in a way, it was. He notices that everyone in the fragrance pavilion is looking at him with eyes full of deep respect. At this moment, he feels like the most brilliant star in the entire Immortal City. Later that night, a voice whispers at his door, asking if he is asleep. It is Sisterly. She tells him she has a shocking secret to share, something that could change everything. She reveals that she is actually a spy planted here in the city by the Immortal Moon Kingdom. Her job is to gather intelligence, and she urgently needs Muge to listen to what she has to say. Their organization is called the Ghost Souls, and they even offer a monthly salary of 8 spirit snacks. She explains that all room and board are fully covered, and if one were to die in the line of duty, there is a massive compensation of 5,000 spirit snacks, and that, she claims, is not all. The Jinyui even provides them with a grand gift. All of these snacks we see here. They intend to give all these snacks to their members, and the benefits continue to pile up. The Jinyui has even opened top-secret accounts at the Ministry of Revenue Bank for those who earn merit. There are even extra rewards to be had. She asks him plainly. Sisterly wants to know if he's in. Muge, ever the skeptic, asks how much commission she actually gets for recruiting someone like him. Sisterly laughs, admitting he caught her. Yes, of course, there is a reward for every new recruit. The organization gives 50 snacks per person, and she offers to split 20 with him right now. She hands him an identity token, marking him as a member of the Ghost Souls of the Immortal Moon Kingdom. On the back, his name has already been neatly engraved. Sisterly was certainly prepared. Muge stares at it, realizing they had even carved his name before he even agreed to join. Suddenly, another voice tells Muge not to panic. It is Su Mengfeng, also known as Su Xiao. Muge wonders why no one is sleeping tonight, but Su Xiao insists that he listen closely. He reveals he is actually Feng Ling, a high-ranking member of the underground intelligence group, Tingfeng Pavilion. Seeing Muge's excellent potential, he wants to recruit him into their secret ranks immediately. He tells him not to refuse just yet. Tingfeng Pavilion offers a monthly salary of 5 spirit snacks. Everything is paid for, and even in death, there is a 3,000 snack payout for the family. Muge begins to wonder if he has stumbled into a massive pyramid scheme. 5 snacks a month, after all. Su Xiao tells him not to be so indecisive. He just needs to say yes to those 5 snacks. He adds that all room and board are covered. Muge, seeing the pattern, agrees immediately, and just like that, he is in. From this moment on, he is a member of Tingfeng Pavilion. He is told to listen for the signals. 3 long and 1 short means a retreat. 3 cat meows before entry signify heavy rain, while 3 bird calls behind the window mean fog. Muge quickly asks him to wait. He reaches for paper to write it down, but is told that is strictly forbidden. This is top secret. It must be burned into his memory. Suddenly, yet another figure appears, revealing he is actually Xue Fu from the Wrath Blood Shop. Muge, now a professional at this, simply asks what the monthly salary is. The offer is 5 spirit snacks a month. Muge doesn't even blink before agreeing to this third job. He tells them to hurry up with the secret codes because, frankly, he really needs to get some sleep. As for all those messy secret signals and complicated sect rules he just heard, he has already forgotten every single one of them. To be honest, who could blame him? He pauses to do the math. 8 snacks from the Immortal Moon Kingdom, 5 from Tingfeng Pavilion, and another 5 from the Wrath Blood Shop. By his rough estimate, his monthly base salary is now over 50 snacks. He is going to be rich. In his mind, he has already made a small fortune. The next morning, a servant arrives with a message. The young lady is asking for him. It is time for his zither lesson. She asks why he hasn't shown up yet, wondering if he's looking for another scolding. Muge, exhausted, asks if he can possibly take just 1 day off to rest. He explains that he had too many part-time jobs last night and didn't sleep, but the answer is a firm no. The servant reminds him that others beg for a lesson from the lady. He shouldn't take his luck for granted. Well, luck is subjective. He mutters about how truly sleepy he is as he finally approaches his master. Muge greets his master, asking which piece of music they will be practicing today. She reveals that she represents the world's premier assassin organization, acting as the ace operative for the group known as Luowang. She formally invites him to join their ranks, which, to be honest, is quite the shock for Muge. Muge tells Sister Dingling that he always knew she was special, and that this job sounds like a real challenge. We learn that Luowang claims to have eyes and ears everywhere, leaving nothing hidden from their sight. They are an invisible web woven across every kingdom, hanging silently over the heads of the most powerful cultivation sects. Their assassins are ranked into 4 top secret tiers: Heaven, Earth, Black, and Yellow. After explaining these ranks, she asks Muge if there is anything else he needs to know. Naturally, Muge's first question for Sister Dingling is about the benefits and the salary. When he asks about the monthly pay, she informs him that Luowang doesn't actually offer a fixed salary. There is no base pay. Instead, it's a commission-based system where headquarters assigns the tasks. Once a job is finished, the earnings are split with the organization. Muge realizes there is no safety net here. He mutters that commission-only work is a tough grind, but she tells him to stop complaining and hands him a token. A moment later, she offers him a manual on the essentials of being an assassin, asking if he's interested. To Muge, this doesn't feel like being an ace operative. It feels like being a source of free labor. The servant insists that the young lady is simply tempering his mind and character, whether he likes it or not. He points out that countless people would beg for such an opportunity. Well, that is certainly one way to look at it. Suddenly, we notice a shift in the air. Something about this aura feels completely wrong. The lady asks Muge why he's firing explosive arrows one after another at that person. We see that the person is wearing the guardian mask of Luowang, a mask that carries significant weight. Sister Dingling asks Muge if he is absolutely sure of what he saw, urging him not to act impulsively. She tells him to come back quickly, feeling a bit like a mother watching her grown son finally take his first steps into the world. It is a moment of pride, really, as Muge prepares for what lies ahead. This, she explains, will be his very first actual combat mission. The organization is sending him to scout the defenses of the Shui Manor outside the city, but he must remember his limits. He is only there to show his face and fulfill the basic requirements of the task. Under no circumstances should he be the one charging into the front lines. If a fight breaks out, he is to hide as far away as possible, and there is one more thing. If his dolly hat happens to fall off during the struggle, he must remember to pick it up, as she spent 2 low-grade spirit stones to buy it for him. He cannot lose it. Muge assures his master that as long as he lives, the hat stays with him. Curious, he asks Sister Dingling why the organization is targeting the Shui Manor, which seems like an ordinary cultivation family. He wonders what could possibly make them worth the trouble. She reveals that Luowang isn't the only group with their eyes fixed on the Shui family. According to their intelligence, over a dozen top-tier powers surrounding Qiuxian City are all secretly watching that place. To Muge, this seems like a massive exaggeration. He can't help but wonder what kind of treasure could be hidden inside the Shui Manor to cause such a stir. Rumor has it that the head of the house, a woman named Shui Ji, is actually a survivor of the legendary Flower Goddess Palace crusade that once shook the world. She is said to hold one of the 3 ultimate legacies of the crusade, the legendary treasure known as the Kosian Fulu. Yes, that is the name that has everyone in such a frenzy. The name sounds incredibly familiar to Muge. He is certain he has heard it somewhere before. With that mystery lingering, he bids Sister Dingling farewell and prepares to set off on his mission. She gives him one final, frantic reminder to make sure he brings that dolly hat back in one piece. Now, rumors say the Shui family is the most powerful clan in all of Choshin City. Naturally, they occupy the most central and prestigious location in the entire region. Since Muge has never actually been there, he remembers Xiaodu's advice about navigating the world. She told him that if he got lost, he should just ask for directions and not be too shy. He stops a local to ask the way to the Shui Manor, leaving the man wondering if Muge has lost his mind. After all, he is wearing full night assassin gear and a black dolly hat in broad daylight. And yet, here he is, openly asking for directions to the city's most prominent noble estate. The local wonders if assassins these days have simply become incredibly arrogant, or perhaps just very bold. When asked what his business is, Muge honestly explains that he is a Luowang assassin on a secret mission. It is a level of sincerity that is, frankly, quite disarming for someone in his profession. The man is so stunned by this honesty that he simply points the way down the main street. He tells Muge to turn left at the second intersection and walk for about 300 or 400 meters. The largest and most grand estate he finds there will be the Shui Manor. Muge realizes this path leads to the same street where the kind lady who once helped him lives. He feels a sudden wave of nostalgia for that place before thanking the local and heading on his way. As he walks, Muge stops at a stall and asks how much the crab skewers are, ordering 3 for himself. The vendor nonchalantly tells him that it will be 1 low-grade spirit stone per skewer. Muge is absolutely floored by the price, accusing the man of daylight robbery right then and there. He argues that snacks like these should only cost 2 copper coins, but the vendor just smiles at his guest. The vendor's tone shifts instantly, threatening Muge that if he doesn't pay up right now, he will head straight to the Shui Manor to report that a Luowang assassin is asking for directions. The man begins shouting to the crowd, asking where everyone is going and causing a scene. He points in every direction, frantically telling the passers-by to look over here and there. He screams at the top of his lungs that an assassin is looking for the Shui family's home. Muge sighs, realizing that the world outside is far more complicated than he ever imagined. To be honest, the people here aren't nearly as sincere as his old neighbors back in Shangba village. He hands over the 3 spirit stones, telling himself that this is simply the price of a very expensive lesson. We return to the mystery of Xiaoling, a girl who seems to be made entirely of strange anomalies. The most unusual thing about her is the terrifying power she keeps hidden beneath her surface. And yet, look at the sheer nerve of this man, daring to show his hand so openly in the middle of the street. He wonders who in all of Choshin City would dare to be this arrogant as he counts the intersections. He remembers the directions, turn left at the second crossing, and walk for exactly 400 meters. It seems that Tong Haoyang is on the verge of actually using his head for once. The atmosphere reminds him of the first time he entered Shijia village and saw the streets filled with fallen beasts. It was a truly terrifying sight, and the memory of it still lingers in the back of his mind. He tells himself he is just a little beggar who came here to find his family. He offers some osmanthus cakes that his family didn't want anymore. The woman snaps, asking why he's at her door again and if her family owes him something. She tells him to wait while she steals a chicken leg from the kitchen. No, that's not right. He is clearly terrified and wants to run away, yet for some reason, he is smiling. He asks himself why on earth is this happening? Suddenly, he senses someone nearby and demands to know who is there. The sudden shock nearly scares him to death. He can feel his heart leaping right into his throat. He tells himself not to be afraid. If he just kills them all, everything will be fine. Then, no one will be able to hurt him anymore as he calls out for Yunduo. He desperately asks if she is still alive, calling out that it's him. He promises Yunduo that he is coming to save her. He is terrified, wondering where she could possibly be. To be honest, the fear he feels in this moment is truly overwhelming. It's horrifying. That monster is staring right at him, right at his very door. How interesting. He thinks he just saw a glimpse of Yunduo. He finally finds her, calling out Yunduo's name with relief. He tells her not to be afraid, repeating that he has come to save her. And so, in the heart of Choshin City, the situation takes another turn. He tells himself that only Yunduo and that kind lady have ever treated him with true warmth. Their kindness was the purest thing he had ever known, asking for absolutely nothing in return. He has always been someone who repays a debt of gratitude, and today, that debt comes due. Deep down, he decides that even if the gods themselves descended to stop him, he will protect Yunduo and fight their way out of this nightmare together. It is terrifying, and to be perfectly honest, he has never felt more afraid in his entire life. Meanwhile, the legacy of the Ko County Falu has already begun to burn. After the Nongshua sect lured the great lady of the Shui mansion out of the city, we see that 7 or 8 top-tier factions have already stormed into the Shui estate. At this point, only the Luowang group has yet to make their grand entrance. The leader wonders if that subordinate Li Mao promised would come to help has arrived yet. His man replies that the newcomer is nowhere to be seen. The subordinate asks if the kid might have already charged inside on his own. The other factions have left men outside to act as reinforcements and lookouts. He suggests they might as well take those men out while they have the chance. The leader tells him to drop such a foolish idea, as offending 8 top factions at once is suicide. He warns him not to drag the group down with him, for the Ko County Falu is at stake. That technique is a path to the great emperor, and rumors say mastering it grants incredible power. It could even allow one to ascend to immortality, and he refuses to wait for some useless rookie. If he misses this once-in-a-lifetime chance, he knows he will never be able to forgive himself. He decides he can't wait any longer and orders his men to charge inside, fearing they are already too late. Suddenly, a figure appears, and the leader panics at the thought of being seen committing such violence. He looks closely and realizes he can see the lower half of the newcomer's face. He recognizes him as Mu, the rookie that Li Mao promised to send as reinforcements. Mu looks up with relief, asking if this is Senior Xiaoyao, glad that someone has finally arrived among all the bodies. He trembles, explaining that there are dead people everywhere inside, and that it was absolutely terrifying. Xiaoyao wonders who could possibly handle this mess, hoping that Ding Ling's protection will be enough to save him. He repeats the name to himself like a prayer, desperate for her presence to shield him from the coming storm. At this point, he is banking everything on Sister Ding Ling's influence to keep him alive through the night. Otherwise, when those powerful factions seek their revenge, he knows he will be torn into tiny pieces. But then, Xiaoyao pauses as a sudden, chilling realization begins to dawn on him. He asks for clarification, wanting to know if every single person inside the estate is truly dead. He stares at the boy, asking the only question that matters. Did you kill them all? Mu looks down sheepishly, insisting that he really didn't mean for things to go that far. It was their own fault, he explains, because they were the ones who decided to attack him first. Xiaoyao stands there in disbelief, remembering how Li Mao described this kid as having terrible self-control. He was supposed to be a mere rookie who was just here to tag along and gain some experience. Realizing the scale of the disaster, Xiaoyao screams for a retreat, wanting to get as far away as possible. Mu panics, calling out for the senior to wait for him as the group begins to flee in terror. He begs them to take him along, but Xiaoyao just tells him to get lost, refusing to be associated with such a monster. Xiaoyao screams at the boy to stay away, telling him to get lost and stop following them immediately. As for Mu, this was now the fourth time he had experienced the bitter sting of being abandoned. And to be perfectly honest, the feeling was starting to make him very, very annoyed. In fact, he was beyond frustrated at being cast aside yet again. Xiaoyao, meanwhile, can't help but wonder what on earth is wrong with this terrifying kid. He declares that the mission is officially over, it's time to clock out and just go home. He tells Mu to go find his sister Li Mao, sarcastically adding that he performed quite well. He calls him an exceptionally brave assassin, which, given the pile of bodies, is a bit of an understatement. With a final goodbye, he makes it clear that their professional relationship ends right here. Mu lets out a breath of relief, admitting that the sudden rejection had scared him half to death. We then shift our focus to a woman named Feng Ling, from the prestigious Tianfeng Pavilion. A guard recognizes her, noting that the scene inside was a total bloodbath. He is shocked to see that she is the only one who managed to make it out alive. He starts to ask if she captured the prisoner Ko Xian, but then quickly changes his mind. He assumes a mere assistant like her wouldn't have the talent for that, so he's just glad she's breathing. Nearby, another survivor, named Yuhan, presents his token, identifying himself as a member of the Xinla secret police. When asked if he secured the prisoner, he can only stammer out a confused and disappointing no. The superior simply calls him useless, showing no sympathy for the trauma he just endured. It seems that along this short stretch of road, barely 700 or 800 meters long, the commander had already encountered nearly a dozen different groups of survivors in total chaos. Fortunately, they were all wearing their respective uniforms, which prevented him from pulling out the wrong identification token. Otherwise, his secret life as a multi-agency freelancer would have been exposed long ago. From an outsider's perspective, the way this young man was operating was nothing short of extraordinary. It was practically legendary, those 7 or 8 different factions waiting outside to receive their people somehow managed to miss each other constantly due to the most bizarre and unlikely coincidences. It allowed his deceptive behavior of working for everyone at once to continue without falling apart, which is quite a feat. Looking at his maneuvers, it truly seemed as though the goddess of luck was frantically favoring him. However, if we look a little closer, we see a strange contradiction beginning to emerge. It felt as if there were a hidden force within the world itself, desperately pushing all those different people to run straight into him. It was as if the world wanted to expose him, an interesting development, to say the least. He appeared to be a child of fortune, a being blessed by destiny. And yet, he was a child of fortune who seemed utterly despised by the very world he inhabited. Even to a seasoned observer, that description sounds a bit strange, doesn't it? He turns to the Tianji number 8 system, asking for a clarification on the boy's actual status. The system responds, explaining that the target is not a native child of fortune born to this realm. Instead, he is an extremely rare case, an outworlder child of fortune who descended from elsewhere. An outworlder with the favor of destiny? Now that is a rare find indeed. He immediately wonders if such a high luck value can be plundered for his own use. The system confirms it is possible and begins scanning the target's luck value right then and there. Suddenly, alarms begin to blare within his mind, signaling a massive system error. The target's luck value is displayed as a staggering 999,000, and it is still climbing. The data overload is so intense that the system's core is on the very brink of a total collapse. A forced emergency update is triggered immediately to prevent the entire interface from burning out. He is told to wait patiently for 30 days while the system restarts, which, naturally, is the worst possible timing. He can hardly believe what he is seeing. The sheer scale of the numbers is nonsensical. To put it in perspective, an ordinary person usually carries a luck value of only 1 or 200. Even a favored genius, a true darling of the heavens, might possess 10 or 20,000 points. The most legendary monsters seen once in an eternity rarely exceed a few 100,000. But here, right in front of him, the display is screaming nearly 1 billion points of pure fortune. The luck value has literally broken the scale, causing his advanced system to crash under the weight of it. He stares at this nouveau riche of destiny, realizing that if he can take it, he will be set for life. Deep down, he views this not as a glitch, but as a magnificent gift from the heavens themselves. Just as he is processing this, a voice calls out, commanding him to stop in his tracks. The newcomer introduces himself as the holy son of the Xiaoyao sect and the lord of Qiuxian city. He addresses our protagonist, Li Xianhe, accusing him of causing a disturbance within his city walls. Li Xianhe realizes with a jolt that he has just run straight into the most powerful local authority. He tries to stay calm, remembering that he might actually have a Xiaoyao sect identity token hidden away. He frantically tries to recall which color the token was, though a sudden, absurd thought crosses his mind. He wonders if this powerful city lord is also, somehow, an undercover disciple of the very same sect. He sifts through his collection, finding the snow axe of the Angry Snow Shop, and then pauses, wondering what on earth this even is. It turns out that every reputable intelligence agency in Qiuxian City has a connection to these tokens. He had somehow managed to work for all of them simultaneously, which makes one wonder how he hasn't been killed yet. Finally, after a frantic search, he finds exactly what he was looking for. He looks up at the city lord and addresses him as senior brother with practiced desperation. He claims to be a fellow disciple, and to be honest, he's aiming for a very specific reaction here. As it happens, he isn't just claiming to be a lowly outer disciple from the fringes of the sect. The token in his hand is clearly engraved with the mark of a disciple from the 100 Flowers Peak. Such an item is impossible to forge, leaving the city lord staring in utter disbelief at the sight of it. The lord asks if he is truly the apprentice of Martial Ant Tang, though he finds the idea completely impossible. Martial Ant Tang is the world-renowned ice fairy, and she has famously never accepted a male disciple in her life. The city lord remains skeptical, but Li Xianhe doubles down on his story, calling him senior brother once more. He explains that after his master accepted him, she simply flew away in a flash, leaving him behind. As a penniless cultivator who couldn't even find the mountain gate, he claims he was left with no choice but to wander. He tells a tragic tale of being lost in Qiuxian City, struggling just to survive on the streets. To make ends meet, he explains that he had to take on several odd jobs, or spiritual tasks, just to stay fed. He laments how difficult the work was, complaining that they wouldn't let him farm and instead forced him to kill. He looks at the city lord with wide eyes, emphasizing that they actually expected him to be an assassin. The city lord realizes the absurdity. The odd jobs this man took involved being a secret agent for 8 top organizations at once. Deep down, the lord realizes that to plunder this man's destiny, he must first crush him professionally. The city lord is internally panicking, realizing that the revelation of Tang Kuei's personal disciple changes everything. He no longer dares to use force, knowing that crossing a woman as volatile as Tang Kuei is a death wish. To offend her is to invite the wrath of her legion of fanatical followers, which is a terrifying prospect, really. In essence, making an enemy of her means making an enemy of half the Xiaoyao sect. Li Xianhe, sensing the shift, warmly suggests that since his senior brother is here, they should celebrate. He invites the lord to the place where he works to share a drink and relax. He promises to take care of everything, acting the part of the helpful junior disciple to perfection. He even offers to introduce him to some top-tier sisters at the establishment. He adds, with a straight face, that mentioning his name will even secure a 20% discount. When asked where exactly he works, he reveals it is the Fragrant Pavilion, a place of quite a different reputation. Upon arrival, he grandly gestures for his senior brother to enter the establishment. He calls out to Sister Li, announcing that he has brought a very important friend along. He asks Sister Hua to prepare their finest private room for the occasion. He playfully calls for the staff to come out and welcome their distinguished guest. Turning serious for a moment, he asks Sister Li to find a doctor to look after Yunduo, his savior. Meanwhile, the staff realizes that Li Xianhe is not just anyone. He is the holy son of the Xiaoyao sect and the city lord. For the secret agents hiding here, being discovered by him would mean a truly gruesome end. One of them curses Mu Gu, wondering how on earth he managed to bring such a dangerous figure home. To them, bringing this god of slaughter to their doorstep is nothing short of a suicide mission. And so, with a forced smile, Chuanxiu steps forward to formally greet the Holy Son, Xinghe. We see Li Xianhe casually informing Sister Li that the Holy Son, Xinghe, is indeed his senior brother. He tells her he will catch up with her in a moment, turning his full attention back to his guest. Xinghe, however, is in a state of pure disbelief, asking if he truly works in a place like this. Yes, of all places. He immediately wonders if their master has any idea what his disciple is up to in his spare time. Li Xianhe admits quite calmly that, no, their master is currently completely in the dark. He even suggests that when Xinghe returns, he should make a point of mentioning it to him. He wants the master to come to the fragrant pavilion personally to take him back home. Now, Tang Kuei is the most renowned beauty of the Xiaoyao sect, famous for her icy and untouchable reputation. To be honest, she is a legend. She is the untainted ice fairy, and Xinghe knows that if she were to ever find out the truth, that her only personal disciple was working as a male host in a brothel, she would do anything to protect her name. He fears she might level the entire city lord's mansion with a single arrow. Righteous cultivators are very sensitive about their image, after all. In fact, they can sometimes be far more extreme than the demonic cultivators they despise. Desperate to avoid a catastrophe, Xinghe asks if he has ever considered a more traditional career path. He offers to provide whatever funds are needed, if only he will agree to quit this scandalous profession. He is practically begging at this point, hoping his junior brother will listen to reason. Li Xianhe, ever the pragmatist, asks exactly how many spirit stones this new job would pay as a base salary. And here we learn the standard rates. A lowly servant in the Xiaoyao sect earns only 1 spirit stone a month. Outer disciples receive 5, while the elite personal disciples are granted 10. Xinghe decides he will offer him 3 spirit stones, thinking that should be enough to satisfy him. His primary goal is simply to get the boy out of this establishment before word gets back to their master. Li Xianhe blinks in confusion, asking what he means by 300. To be honest, he seems genuinely baffled. Xinghe curses under his breath, wondering who on earth gave his junior brother such an inflated appetite for wealth. He clarifies that he meant 3 spirit stones, but Li Xianhe quickly cuts him off with a reality check. He explains that he currently works 7 or 8 part-time jobs, and that's not even counting his reimbursed living expenses. When he adds in the bonuses for field assignments, he easily clears 400 to 500 spirit stones every single month. He tells his brother he doesn't exactly need those 3 stones. Xinghe can only stammer out a shocked how much. Li Xianhe repeats it calmly, 400 to 500, a perfectly reasonable sum, in his eyes at least. Xinghe is floored, realizing that even the entire city lord's mansion doesn't bring in that much net income in a month. Between his base salary and commissions at Xinla Pavilion, plus travel subsidies from Tingfeng, the numbers really start to climb. Add in the overtime pay from the Nuxu shop, and even he hadn't realized the full scale of his earnings until this moment. After a quick mental calculation, he sees his monthly income has broken the 500 mark, nearing 600 spirit stones. Xinghe looks at him, his voice trembling slightly as he addresses his junior brother once more. He asks if he is including the money from his services at the brothel in that total, feeling quite uneasy about the answer. He suggests that this might not be entirely appropriate, but Li Xianhe is quick to defend his professional honor. He reminds him that he is, after all, the top star of the Fragrant Pavilion, a title he carries with some pride. He is the sole successor of the zither skills taught by the famous master Ding Ling of the nascent soul stage. Every bit of those appearance fees was earned through his own hard work and musical talent. Yes, naturally. Xinghe realizes with a sinking heart that it's over. There is no way he can convince him to leave the Fragrant Pavilion now. With a monthly income of over 500 spirit stones, the boy is essentially a mogul in his own right. Many foundation establishment cultivators won't earn that much in their entire lives, which, frankly, explains a lot. Honestly, who wouldn't be a little dazed by those kinds of numbers? It's enough to make anyone's head spin. Xinghe laughs, jokingly asking his junior brother if the Dark Pavilion is still hiring new recruits. Li Xianhe beams, calling brother Mu his true soulmate, as they share a hearty laugh over the situation. He calls out to Xiaomi, telling her to settle the bill for Master Xinghe and brother Mu. However, Xiaomi explains that Sister Li gave specific orders. Since Xinghe is the city lord, his bill is on the house. Xinghe smirks, thinking that while he might not earn as much as this kid, he has his own perks. After all, he doesn't even have to pay for his meals when the boss waives the entire check. Li Xianhe's smile falters as he asks if he still gets his commission even if no money was collected. He worries that without a payment, there might be no cut for him, which simply won't do. He points out that he spent hours drinking and providing therapy, practically selling his soul for the job. He insists that after all that effort and talent, there must be a commission. Yes, he's quite serious about his craft. He turns back to his senior brother with a sudden, mischievous laugh that bodes ill for Xinghe's wallet. He claims he just spoke with the boss and, purely as a favor to him, managed to negotiate a deal. He tells Xinghe that the boss insisted on giving him a 30% discount instead of a full waiver. Now, he only needs to pay 20 spirit stones to cover the balance. A bargain, in his opinion. He urges him to pull out the money, but Xinghe is completely bewildered by this sudden turn of events. Xinghe protests that he clearly heard Xiaomi say it was free, but Li Xianhe insists he must have misheard. He starts patting Xinghe down, asking which pocket the spirit stones are in, the left or the right. He offers to help him dig them out, showing a level of helpfulness that is, frankly, a bit suspicious. Xinghe can only wonder what on earth he actually came here for in the first place. To be honest, we're wondering too. Suddenly, it hits him. He actually came here to intercept the other man's spiritual aura. Instead of capturing any aura, he somehow found himself dragged into the fragrance garden for no reason at all. And now, he's somehow on the hook for 20 spirit stones. To make matters worse, he ended up with a male therapist he didn't even want. And of course, he's the one who has to foot the entire bill. He even had to pay the service tip for the guy. Honestly, the nerve of some people. He reminds himself that he is a dignified city lord, after all. Yet here he is, in the world of cultivation, getting scammed by a male therapist. Brother Wu really is a piece of work. The shop clearly said the meal was on the house. Did the kid think he was deaf? He even had the audacity to go through his wallet. Xinghe decides right then that he's going to Manhwa Peak to file a formal complaint. Yes, he is absolutely going to report this. He's quite determined about it. We shift scenes as Xinghe checks on a young girl, asking Yunduo if she's feeling any better. She looks up at him, calling out to her brother Xiaoqi with a trembling voice. She confesses that she truly thought she was going to die because of the assassins. According to her, the waterfront was crawling with killers everywhere she looked. She specifically remembers a monster hiding within the shadows of the carriage. His entire face was covered in blood, a sight no child should ever have to see. She describes how he kept smiling at her while he continued his grim work. It was terrifying, and even now, the poor girl is still shaking from the memory. Xinghe gently comforts her, telling Yunduo that it's all right now and there's nothing left to fear. He tells her it's all right now, repeating that as long as he is here, she is safe. He assures her that the bastard in the bamboo hat has surely been cut down by now. But then, a realization hits him. What exactly happened back at the waterfront? The terrifying killer she described, the one covered in blood, it sounds suspiciously like himself. This is bad. He wonders if the little girl has actually recognized him as that monster. He quickly tries to soothe her, telling her to be good and that there's nothing to fear. He playfully tells all the demons and ghosts to go away, trying to lighten the mood. We learn that he has 15 childhood friends, all of whom possess the talent of the Great Earth. As they are brother and yo, he feels an immense amount of pressure to keep up with them. He tells himself that if he doesn't work hard, he won't be able to protect them in the future. After all, he has to bring glory to Shangba village, which is no small task, to be honest. He reflects on the divine fortune technique, a power truly worthy of opening the immortal gates. It even allows for the creation of talismans that can facilitate long-distance teleportation. The book explains that these aren't just rigid runes. The type of fortune one derives depends entirely on insight. He admits that in terms of physical constitution or spiritual roots, he might not match the world's heroes. But when it comes to comprehension and insight, he holds himself in rather high regard. Muge believes that if the world's total insight were a single measure, he possesses more than his fair share. Convinced that no one has more insight than him, he decides to study a high-speed movement talisman first. His goal is to make his speed break through the very barriers of the mist. And with that determination, he prepares to see what he can truly bring forth. The speed is simply incredible, even with his specialized tools to assist his cultivation. He can barely track the flight path of a single fly. It is, quite frankly, terrifying. Suddenly, a realization strikes him. Perhaps the swift travel talisman he drew has a massive range. He wonders if it created a powerful energy field that projected all that speed onto the fly. With this newfound velocity, he believes he has successfully channeled the power directly into the tiny insect. Yes, he tells himself, that must be exactly what happened. He feels like an absolute genius, but after working through the night, exhaustion finally sets in. It is time, he decides, to head back to his room and get some much-needed rest. However, he soon discovers his Divine Star Talisman can actually influence the flow of time. To his eyes, it appears as though the entire world has suddenly begun to accelerate. It is truly worthy of the title of an immortal fortune, a power beyond ordinary comprehension. He looks at Kong Kong, trying to make sense of the blurred reality shifting around them. Muge's companion looks at him with concern, asking if he is feeling unwell or if something is wrong. She wonders if he suffered a head injury during yesterday's mission that scrambled his brain. She fears the worst, worrying that poor Muge might actually be having a stroke right now. But for him, the speed is overwhelming. He feels as though he's about to fly right out of his skin. It's too fast, far too fast. He begs Sisterly to slow down because he simply can't take it. He pleads for her to ease up, feeling as though he's on the verge of losing his dinner. Meanwhile, someone calls out to the martial uncle, asking where exactly he thinks he's going. They remind him of his previous commitment, specifically the disciple he recently took under his wing. He announces his intention to head down to the city of immortals to bring his disciple back to the mountain. The man is convinced that the boy is a disgrace to their sect's reputation, a truly wretched creature. He is so incensed that he vows to skin the boy alive the moment he finds him. And this is where things become truly complicated for our panicked observer, who realizes he is in deep trouble. He recalls a recent banquet he attended with his master at the Drifting Fragrance House. There was a performer there whose music was agonizing to hear, dressed in rags and acting as a lowly entertainer. As he thinks back on Muge, the realization begins to dawn on him with terrifying clarity. That pathetic performer was none other than the demon-tainted disciple the martial uncle left in the city. It was embarrassing enough that the boy was using the martial uncle's name to offer prayers for coins. But to find out he is now working in a brothel? If the martial uncle learns of this, the consequences will be dire. He fears the old man might actually suffer a spiritual collapse from the shock, so he decides he must stop him from leaving. Desperate, he suggests that perhaps the martial uncle should simply consider taking on a brand new disciple instead. He asks if they can't just forget about that useless fellow named Muge and move on with their lives. The martial uncle dismisses this as nonsense, but the young man insists he must listen to a new proposal. He claims that just yesterday, he spent a small fortune of 300 low-grade spirit stones on a special mission. He explains that he scouted, or rather, poached, 2 peerless talents from a nearby crumbling sect just for him. He describes them as the kind of geniuses one only encounters once in 10,000 years. A slight exaggeration, perhaps. Just then, a young man named Yuchen appears to pay his respects, leaving the observer utterly stunned. If his eyes aren't deceiving him, and they rarely do in these situations, he sees something remarkable. Deep down, he senses that this boy possesses a hidden power that is nothing short of terrifying. He realizes that this is the eternal God King physique, a peerless constitution that appears only once in 10,000 years. The martial uncle asks if this is truly the top-tier talent he claimed to have bought for 300 low-grade spirit stones. The young man confirms it, prompting the martial uncle to wonder where on earth he managed to find such a deal. Just then, a second disciple steps forward to pay her respects to the master and the martial uncle. He explains that this girl was essentially a buy one, get one free deal from a small sect looking to clear their inventory. The martial uncle admits he didn't pay anything, as he is used to being alone and has no idea how to actually teach disciples. He worries about leading them astray, but eventually decides that if he has to teach one, he might as well teach them all. He tells the 3 of them to rise and instructs them to stay on the mountain for the time being. He plans to head down the mountain to find their eldest senior brother and bring him back before arranging their training. The young man panics, insisting that Yuchen and Julien are new here and don't know their way around yet. He suggests that the martial uncle should stay on the mountain to help them get familiar with 100 Flowers Peak instead. As for that wretched creature down in the city, the young man offers to go personally and capture the boy himself to bring him back. The martial uncle watches the girl, wondering why she seems so genuinely concerned about that fellow Muge. To be honest, love is a truly mysterious and often nonsensical thing. She doesn't spare a single glance for the geniuses surrounding her on the mountain. Instead, her heart is troubled over a useless waste who spends his days begging for scraps at the foot of the mountain. He sighs to himself, thinking what a terrible waste of emotion this all is. He curses Muge under his breath, calling him a disgrace to their sect's reputation. He demands that the boy show himself and face the consequences of his actions. We see a warm welcome as someone calls out, "It's Senior Sister Mu. Quick, come in, come in." A distinguished guest has arrived, and she is promptly ushered to the luxury, Clear Wind and Dragon Moon suite on the 2nd floor. Muge calls out urgently for Aya to bring him his zither immediately. He announces his grand intention to perform a special piece for Senior Sister Mu today. But as he starts blooming flowers in full moon, she snaps at him to let go of her. She explains that she is actually there on behalf of martial Uncle Tang to teach him a much-needed lesson. After all, he is supposed to be the chief disciple of 100 Flowers Peak. Spending his days as a host in a brothel is, to be perfectly honest, a complete disgrace to his station. She tells him that even if he has no shame, their martial uncle still does, but Muge simply pivots to ask about the daily specials. He casually wonders if she would prefer the large or the small fruit platter with her service. She reflexively asks for the large one before realizing she's been distracted from her mission. She tells him to stop changing the subject, as she is strictly there to settle the score with him. Ignoring her protest, he calls for Xiaomi to bring the deluxe spiritual fruit platter and summons the staff. He orders the finest wine and the most beautiful Golden Wind and Jade do dance performance for their guest. In his mind, a life like this is far superior to anything else. Compared to the dull and lonely cultivation on the mountain, this is 1,000 times more joyful. He truly believes that nothing on the mountain could ever be this comfortable. To him, this is exactly how an immortal should be spending their days. He has watched the most exquisite performances and tasted the rarest delicacies imaginable. And after drinking the finest aged wine, he is convinced he has found his true paradise. We see that she even has close friends thoughtfully lighting her way through the evening. It truly has been a delightful day, all things considered. But suddenly, she pauses, wondering what exactly she came here to do in the first place. She remembers now, she was supposed to capture Muge and drag him back to the mountain. She stares at her empty hands, horrified by what she has actually been doing instead. She tells herself this won't do. She must go back and tie him up to force him home. This place is a nightmare. Even a dog walking in would end up spending its last 2 coins. To be perfectly honest, she has been completely drained of every cent she had. She eventually gives up, realizing that since she's broke, there is nothing more she can do today. She decides to let Muge off the hook just this once, though her pride is clearly wounded. She mutters under her breath that scoundrel had better watch his back. Meanwhile, Li Xinghe finds the sheer idiocy of Morong Yu absolutely hilarious. She arrived in a towering rage, ready to arrest a man and bring him to justice. Instead, she was tricked by that boy into spending a fortune at a brothel. Now that her pockets are empty, Xinghe decides to help spread the word about Mugei's fall from grace. He wants the news of the chief disciple working as a male model in a brothel to travel fast. He intends for the entire cultivation world to know exactly what Mugei has been up to. Since Mugei dared to swindle him out of 20 snacks, Xinghe is determined to ruin his reputation entirely. His subordinate hesitates, noting that while a woman's reputation would be destroyed by a brothel, such a scandal might not have the same devastating impact on a man standing. But we have to remember that Mugei is a man, and a man working in a brothel. Well, it might not have the devastating impact one would expect. It simply isn't the same. Xinghe is outraged, wondering if a man can truly abandon all his boundaries and morals just by working in such a place. He questions what kind of values his subordinate even holds. He insists on equality in this matter. He wants every single person in the Xiaoyao sect to know about this scandalous affair. He is determined to break Mugei's spirit entirely. He wants to ruin the man's reputation and disrupt his inner peace as a final act of revenge. Meanwhile, Mugei is told that he has finally become a qualified ghost within their ranks. We learn that several powerful forces in Qiuxian City have been watching the Wangshuan Mountains for a millennium. They have discovered a peerless divine fruit there, and it is finally time for it to ripen. Mugei is ordered to represent the Xianyue kingdom in the struggle for this treasure, though he claims he rarely travels. He admits to having social anxiety and fears getting lost, an honest confession that his superior strangely appreciates. The rules for the competition were set by the 8 major powers, each sending their top experts to the front. It is described to him as a rare and invaluable opportunity for personal growth and training. Suddenly, Mugei is greeted by multiple voices asking the same question: "Why are you here?" He is then told that tonight, he must represent the Tingfeng Pavilion at Gotiao Cliff. He is expected to join the meeting of the various factions to discuss the battle for the mountain's treasure. Mugei pauses, realizing the absurdity of the situation. The Xianyue kingdom has already sent him. And now, the Tingfeng Pavilion is also sending him to the exact same meeting. He begins to suspect, with a sinking feeling, that every single faction might be sending him as their representative. He realizes with a start that in this entire high-stakes mission, he is quite literally the only person involved. We see that 8 of the most powerful factions are convening for a top-secret, high-level meeting. The goal is to decide how to divide the legendary treasure of the mountains among themselves. But as it turns out, and this is where the situation becomes truly absurd, when the time for the meeting arrives, Mugei is the only representative who actually shows up. As the meeting begins, he finds himself suggesting that the treasure should be divided equally. But then, he immediately shoots down his own proposal, calling it complete nonsense. Speaking as the representative of the Xianyue kingdom, he declares that he simply cannot agree to those terms. Then, switching roles again, he insists that as a Luowang assassin, he intends to take everything for himself. He scratches his head in confusion, wondering why his scalp feels so itchy all of a sudden. It seems that even his improved cultivation techniques and his righteous energy aren't quite enough to help him make sense of this bizarre mental gymnastics. His superior tells him that he must take very good care of himself while he is out in the world. Mugei is reminded that while the Luowang organization is sending him to the Wangshuan Mountains, he shouldn't rush to the front lines. He should let the other factions scout the path first, or so they think. They tell him it doesn't even matter if they fail to secure the divine fruit in the end. The young lady is one of the 7 great powers of the nascent soul, so she certainly isn't lacking a few measly fruits. The primary goal, we learn, is simply for him to gain some much-needed life experience. Mugei looks around, wondering where these other factions are supposed to come from if he is all of them. He eventually turns to his fellow travelers and asks, quite simply, what it is they are actually looking for. We see the group looking quite menacing, scouring the area for anyone they can find. Naturally, anyone who catches a glimpse of them is terrified and immediately tries to hide. They suspect Mugei must have some powerful backing, given that he actually dares to approach them for secrets. One of them holds up a portrait and asks if he has seen the person pictured there. Mugei wonders what the person did wrong, but they simply tell him to move along and stay out of the way. They are genuinely surprised that he doesn't even recognize the emblem of the Momin Flower Goddess Palace. They dismiss him as a clueless country bumpkin, deciding it isn't worth their time if he has no information. After all, there is nothing particularly special about him in their eyes. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts as the group bows deeply to greet the arriving Hall Master Tang Feng. We then see a shocking sight. A portrait of the icy Ice Mountain Fairy has somehow ended up in a common brothel. It appears she is being advertised as a male model for entertainment, which is quite the unexpected career change. The rumors claim that the Master of the 100 Flowers is now the top attraction in the city of Qiuxian. The crowd begins to chant a rhythmic slogan, repeating 10 nights in one over and over again. The chant continues to echo through the streets, growing louder with every repetition. It seems the entire city has been caught up in this strange, repetitive frenzy. And then, the chant takes a personal turn as they begin calling out Muge's name directly. Tang Kabin is absolutely furious, accusing Muge of betraying his ancestors and ruining their reputation. He declares that Muge has brought nothing but shame to the 100 Flowers name with his scandalous behavior. He swears that if he doesn't tear Muge into 1,000 pieces today, he will give up his name entirely. Meanwhile, the master prepares to head down the mountain to attend a meeting at the main hall of leisure. We hear the master questioning the rumors about the top disciple of the 100 Flowers sect. He asks if it is truly possible that his student is working as a male model in Chosun City. A voice chimes in, suggesting that performing for a living is surely better than begging on the streets. The master turns to Li Xinghe, the city lord, noting that he knew Muge was involved in such scandalous business. Instead of stopping it, Xinghe has been spreading the news until the entire city is talking about it. The master wonders aloud if the Holy Sun is intentionally trying to humiliate his own elder. Xinghe wonders how this crazy woman found out he leaked the news, while outwardly pleading for her to calm down. He claims he wouldn't dare offend her, to which she sharply replies that he had better not. Meanwhile, Shitong prepares to collect the surrounding spiritual energy. A major opportunity has arrived. If Tang Kuei and Muge have a public falling out, things will get interesting. Expelling him from the sect would surely dissipate a significant portion of his inner aura. And so, our observer decides to wait in the shadows like a clever bird of prey. The demand rings out across the area. Where exactly is Muge hiding? The order is given for him to crawl out and face the consequences immediately. Panic sets in as someone fears that Xiao Mengxian's secret identity as a spy has finally been compromised. They assume the high-ranking officials of the leisure sect have come personally to make an arrest. Since he was the one who recruited Xiao Meng, he resolves not to let her take the fall for this. He declares to Tang Fengzhu that he will never betray Muge, even if it costs him his life. The response is swift and cold, as if he is practically begging for a death sentence. Suddenly, his courage wavers, and he begins to beg Tang Fengzhu for mercy instead. The demand is repeated with even more intensity. Where exactly is Muge hiding? He insists that Muge is the newly recruited ace secret agent of their Nuxia shop. He declares that even if it costs him his life, he will never reveal the truth. Shidong watches this in utter disbelief, wondering what on earth is happening. He has seen many children of fortune who inspire loyalty, but never anything this absurd. It is often said that performers lack true loyalty, yet here in the Fragrance Pavilion, everyone seems willing to risk their lives for Muge. It is truly a bizarre sight to behold. Just then, a report reaches the city lord and Tang Fengzhu. Someone saw him earlier. Muge was seen leaving Chosun City early this morning, carrying a large travel pack. When asked which way he went, the messenger reveals he headed toward the Wanchuan Mountains. That mountain range is vast and seemingly endless, a difficult place to track anyone. Finding one person, there is a monumental task, especially with powerful demons lurking within. Fengzhu realizes that entering with her powerful aura would surely alert the great demons. Xinghe asks if her urgency to find her disciple is due to the upcoming sect competition. She scoffs at the idea, asking how she could possibly rely on a mere street performer. She claims she only wants to find him to stop him from further embarrassing the Baihua Peak. Though Muge lacks talent, he is still a foundation establishment cultivator, after all. If he competes against the new Qi refining disciples, he might actually secure a decent rank. She orders Xinghe to have his men tie up that rebellious disciple the moment he returns. Meanwhile, ever since Muge began practicing that modified cultivation technique, as Muge continues his journey, he notices his thoughts becoming sharper, though a dark urge to kill begins to cloud his mind. He tells himself this bloodlust doesn't fit his cautious nature, especially now that he is about to cross the river. Beyond that water lies the territory of savage demonic beasts and ruthless magic cultivators. To be perfectly honest, the world outside the city walls feels far too dangerous for his liking. At his current pace of extreme caution and stealth, he estimates it will take another 6 months. But he should eventually reach Gotiao Gorge safely. Of course, if anyone heard that a foundation establishment cultivator needed half a year to travel a few dozen miles, they would likely drop dead from pure exasperation. Suddenly, a shadow flickers, and he is nearly frightened out of his wits, barely daring to look back. He keeps his eyes averted, refusing to glance at whatever might be lurking in the brush. His heart races as he maintains his resolve not to look, fearing what he might discover. He lets out a breath of relief. For a moment, he truly thought a peerless demonic beast had found him. Wait, it was only a crow. While crows aren't exactly man-eating monsters, we should remember that in his village, these creatures are considered an extremely unlucky omen, a sign of impending doom. He wonders if the heavens are sending him a warning that today is simply not a good day for travel. Perhaps a bloody disaster awaits him on the road. He decides it is better to be safe than sorry. Safety first, after all. He chooses to rest today and check the almanac before continuing his journey tomorrow. Meanwhile, a mysterious figure watches from the shadows, noting that while others desire power over nations, what he truly wants is the lives of those belonging to the 8 great powers. From the moment they met in Chosun City to this very spot, the pursuit has been relentless. It only takes a few days to cover this distance. By his calculations, they will arrive by tomorrow at the latest. We see that this is the very spot where the secret agents of those hidden powers gather for their meetings. They are all here to fight for control over the various nations, a truly massive achievement, if they can pull it off. Zhu Qianming is certain that this victory belongs to him and him alone. He orders everyone to stay in their positions and remain perfectly hidden in ambush. He makes it clear that until he gives the command, no one is to move a muscle. Not even a single fly is allowed to escape their perimeter. Yes, he is quite serious about that. He tells himself it won't be long now. That group of secret agents should be arriving any moment. He is confident that this time, he will catch every single one of them in his net. According to his own rigorous calculations, everything is proceeding exactly as planned. Those rats, as he calls them, should be reaching the battlefield at this very second. One of his followers asks if they should continue to wait, as the silence is becoming heavy. Qianming feels like he's been waiting so long he's practically soaking in it, but he tells his juniors to stay calm. He reasons that they might have encountered a strong enemy on the road, so they must maintain total silence. He tells himself that a good meal is worth the wait, even if the guests are running late. It's coming soon. He is absolutely certain that this time, they are just around the corner. But as time passes, his patience finally snaps, and he wonders who can tell him what is going on. He demands to know where on earth the people from the 8 great powers have disappeared to. He repeats it to himself, desperate for an answer that simply isn't coming. The frustration is clear as he wonders again where those representatives could possibly be hiding. Meanwhile, we turn to senior sister Morong, who seems troubled by the upcoming sect competition. Our story shifts to the preparations for the event, which were originally supposed to be handled by Zhu Qianming. But that man has vanished to who knows where, leaving the entire burden of the work on one person's shoulders. She feels utterly exhausted, wondering if her senior brother will actually participate in the upcoming competition. She asks if she will finally get to meet the legendary senior brother everyone talks about. To her, senior brother is such a wonderful title, and just mentioning it brings a smile to her face. In her mind, the title is always associated with power, mystery, and dominance. Morong looks at Zhu Lian and warns her that this particular senior brother might be a little unique. She suggests it might be better not to get her hopes up too high. A wise piece of advice, to be honest. We then see Yuer being asked if she has kept a close eye on the city of Qiuxian. The question remains, has that rebellious Mu Ge started his journey back yet? Yuer explains to her martial uncle that Mu Ge left a month ago after accepting a mission from the Luoyang. Since then, he hasn't returned, and the Wangchuan Mountains have recently been plagued by dangerous floods. She fears the worst, as the situation in the mountains has become increasingly dire. After all, he only has the cultivation level of the foundation building stage. To be missing for an entire month in such a treacherous place is a grim omen indeed. The outcome seems obvious to everyone. There is a high chance that not even his bones remain. The area is terrifying, and she admits she was too afraid to even step inside to look for him. She turns to Yun Duo and pleads to take a different path instead. The atmosphere here is simply too horrifying for her to endure any longer. She reminds herself that this man named Mu was, at the very least, a grown man of the foundation building stage. She wonders if she could show a bit more courage, telling herself that if they want to scold her, let them. After all, if they are allowed to throw skulls around to scare people, she should certainly be allowed to feel afraid. It is a strange logic, but to her, safety must always come first, a sentiment hard to argue with, really. We then see her turn to Mu Ge, pointing out how others in the cultivation world struggle against heaven for luck. They fight for creation and opportunity, while he lacks even the basic spiritual roots to govern himself. She warns him that if he continues to waste his time on these tedious journeys, he will eventually end up as nothing more than a handful of yellow dust. Suddenly, she pauses in shock, realizing the man before her is indeed Mu Ge. She asks if his sister, Wang Tuxian, hadn't already given him snacks and told him to return to their hometown. How is it that after traveling for an entire month, he has ended up right here? Young Master Zhu then arrives, announcing he has returned from the mountains with a rather decent harvest. To be honest, hearing the noble pursuit of cultivation opportunities described as mountain gathering is a first for us. Zhu tells Jingyu to give this candlelight tree to Brother Mu as a gift. He asks Mu to send his regards to his sister, noting they spent a whole month guarding this tree before uprooting it. Jingyu hands it over, telling his senior brother to take it and find a good place to plant it. It can still survive, which is a bit of a miracle in these times. It seems the cultivation world has developed its own version of a home delivery service. Mu Ge notes that he hasn't even entered the dungeon yet, and the rewards are already being handed to him. Jingyu grumbles to his senior brother about giving away the candlelight tree they worked so hard to get. He can't believe they gave it to that coward for nothing, though he claims he doesn't truly care about a single fruit. He complains that this wretched fruit forced him to hide in the grass for a month, making him miss the sect's grand competition. To make matters worse, he didn't catch a single thief, and now just looking at the fruit makes his blood boil. Giving it away was simply his way of getting it out of his sight. But then, we see their attention shift as they wonder what could have possibly happened here. Jingyu is horrified by the piles of dead demonic beasts, certain that the demon race will never let this matter rest. He fears chaos is coming, as the Xiaoyao sect and the Wangchuan demons are about to lose their fragile peace. Their conflicts had always been minor skirmishes, but seeing so many beasts slaughtered in one place changes everything. It seems clear to him that someone is deliberately trying to provoke a full-scale war between the two races. There is a tension in the air now, a lingering sensation that something is very wrong. He notices a specific aura left behind, which he suspects belongs to the Confucian noble spirit art. His companion questions him, wondering if the noble spirit isn't supposed to be invisible and colorless. He is certain he isn't mistaken, noting that this particular surge of noble spirit is highly unusual. It is so righteous that it feels sinister, absurdly so, in fact, and in this world, there is only one culprit. Only that group of pedantic Confucian scholars could ever produce such a mutated form of righteous energy. Those scholars don't care for eternal life. They only seek fame in history books and love causing trouble. Not long ago, Master Wanwan from the Jinshio Academy was seen nearby, likely spreading this very energy. Looking at the tragic scene before them, the answer seems painfully obvious to the senior brother. It appears the Jinshio Academy has decided to deal a lethal blow to the demon race once and for all, and they intentionally chose the territory of the Xiaoyao sect to carry out their grim work. Realizing they are being framed, they decide they must return to the sect immediately to report the danger. They realize they must act quickly, reaching the sect before the demon army begins its inevitable march. Their only hope is to expose this massive conspiracy before the world descends into total chaos. Meanwhile, we see Mo has exactly 8 vermilion fruits. He offers 4 to little Yunduo. He plans to eat the other 4 himself, though he quickly realizes his count was slightly off. There are actually 2 more left over, and a curious Yunduo asks Mo what they are. He casually claims it's just fruit juice from when he was picking them, a small lie, of course. He tells Yunduo that since his talent is poor, eating these precious fruits would simply be a waste. Instead, he suggests selling them for a good price to make their lives a bit easier. After all, life following Brother Mo would be much better with a little extra coin in their pockets. Yunduo urges him to return home, mentioning that all the young ladies there have been worried sick. She specifically points out Zhang Jinjin, who seemed particularly distressed during his long absence. Apparently, she was quite restless, constantly asking everyone if they knew where he had gone. Mo is genuinely confused, wondering why on earth Zhang Jinjin would be looking for him. He decides it's best to hurry back, perhaps sensing that he stayed away just a bit too long. Back at the house, a frustrated woman grumbles that if the boy didn't return soon, she'd set up a memorial for him. She even jokes about burying a symbolic grave, such was her level of dramatic concern. To be honest, she often feels like a worried mother watching her child travel 1,000 miles away. When Mo finally arrives, she asks why a simple errand took him such an absurdly long time. She immediately begins fretting, asking if he encountered any danger during his mysterious journey. She checks him over frantically, desperate to know if he's been hurt anywhere at all. Curiosity finally gets the better of her, and she asks Brother Mo what his current cultivation level actually is. She finds it baffling that as a powerful nascent soul cultivator, she somehow cannot see through his realm at all. Mo reflects on how, whether in Shangba village or here in Chosian City, he is surrounded by people who truly care. He notices that Sister Dingling is still at the foundation building stage, which is a bit concerning given the circumstances. He casually explains that he found a secret manual on the road and learned a technique to hide his true aura. She nods, noting that learning to hide his presence shows he's finally starting to act a bit more clever. She then tells him to go change his clothes immediately, as they've started to smell quite a bit from his travels. But as he looks at his own reflection, a strange voice begins to chant, "This isn't me, this isn't me." The denial continues to echo in his mind, repeating that the figure he sees simply isn't who he is. It's a bizarre moment of dissociation, as if he's looking at a complete stranger in the mirror. He keeps insisting to himself that the person standing there is someone else entirely. We learn that this is the result of the techniques he researched while inside the coffin and during his recent journey. He has successfully mastered the avatar technique, but he quickly realizes that this particular clone is different. It seems to have some very distinct differences from any conventional avatar he's ever heard of. This avatar doesn't actually exist in reality. Instead, it resides entirely within his own consciousness. To be honest, the whole situation is enough to make anyone feel like they've seen a ghost. When he asks the figure who it is, the entity simply replies that it is his own avatar. Mo is horrified, flatly denying that such a dark reflection could possibly be a part of him. He insists he is a kind-hearted, brave, and righteous person who would never harbor such a murderous spirit. The avatar finds this claim absolutely hilarious, letting out a laugh that is both mocking and deeply unsettling. The entity mocks him, asking if he truly fails to recognize that he is actually a cold-blooded Shura who kills without blinking. A little later, the scene shifts as someone calls out to Brother Mo. Xuanzi asks what is wrong, but the other person simply brushes it off, claiming it is nothing. Still, Shengzi admits he feels something is deeply wrong with Mo, especially since he just returned from the Wanchuan Mountains. It seems that as soon as he left, a massive catastrophe occurred within those very mountains. Word has spread that tens of thousands of demonic beasts were found dead along the banks of the Wanchuan River. Some even possess the bloodline of king beasts, but his companion thinks Shengzi is simply overthinking things. After all, they view Mo as nothing more than a tool for pill-making, hardly capable of such a grand feat. Meanwhile, Mo realizes that Li Xinghe has set his sights on something he is carrying. The problem is, he cannot yet determine exactly what it is that the man is plotting to take. He wonders if the man is perhaps wary of his Xiantian breathing method 5.0, a reasonable concern, to be honest. When asked what the matter is, Mo notes with some discomfort that the man is essentially investigating his entire body. We then learn that the Xiaoyao sect is preparing for its grand internal competition. A mysterious figure approaches with a dark request. He wants a man named Yu Yuchen to be eliminated. The target belongs to the 100 Flowers Peak, and apparently, his heart is beyond any hope of salvation. The person being asked responds with a dry question, asking if the stranger realizes he is also a disciple of Tang Kuei. Asking a man to kill his own junior brother is a bold move, but the stranger simply replies that he is well aware. He knows the man is Tang Kuei's top disciple, but also an assassin for the Luowang known as Fengling. He goes on to list even more secret identities, from a ghost of the Jinyui to a member of the Blood Hall, leaving Mo utterly stunned. It turns out that in the presence of a true powerhouse, his many layers of disguises are impossible to hide. The stranger continues, noting that once those secret identities are stripped away, Mo is merely a nobody from a tiny mountain village. He even mentions the name, Shangba Village, just to prove how much he truly knows. He wonders aloud what secrets could possibly be hidden in a place that produced 15 top-tier geniuses in a single generation. In his mind, such a thing cannot be a coincidence. That village must be hiding a massive opportunity. The only reason it remains untouched, he claims, is because the deterrent power of the Faxian saints still lingers there. Mo addresses him as Lord Tiannu, his mind racing as he realizes the gravity of the situation. He argues that Yu Yuchen is his beloved friend and a brother in arms, a bond that should be sacred. Naturally, he demands a higher price, but the stranger refuses, offering only 50 low-grade spirit stones. The stranger threatens to find someone else, even as Mo protests that the target is his very own junior brother. Mo tries to haggle for 80 stones, pointing out that the winner of the upcoming Sect competition will receive much more. The reward for first place is a god-transforming level technique. If he wants wealth, he is told to simply go and win it. Mo counters that winning the competition would be a result of his own hard work and something he rightfully deserves. However, the 80 stones for the assassination are a separate matter entirely, but the stranger remains unmoved. He won't add a single stone to the pile, leaving Mo to either take the job or leave it. Later, Mo tells Yunduo that they will head up the mountain tomorrow to gather some information. He instructs her to pack their belongings tonight, just in case they don't find a clear opening to strike. If things look too dangerous, they will simply flee under the cover of night and return to Shangba village. He figures they can just farm their small plot of land. After all, anyone who wants this miserable assassin life is welcome to it. He is finished serving these masters, but then his thoughts drift back to his junior brother, Yu Yuchen. We see him reflecting on the situation, realizing he may have underestimated the complexity of what lies ahead. We see him pondering his next move, perhaps wondering if a simple life of farming grain is truly enough. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts as he receives a piece of top-secret information that changes everything. Someone has placed a massive bounty of 1 million low-grade spirit stones on his life through the Luowang network. A top-tier assassin has already accepted the contract, and while many people want him dead, this is different. The fact that he has enemies isn't a surprise, but the sheer scale of this price tag certainly is. He hadn't expected anyone to spend such a fortune just to mobilize an elite killer from the Luowang organization. In the eastern region, they say the Luowang net only opens one way, straight toward the gates of hell. No one targeted by them has ever survived, leading him to ask his senior sister if she can identify the assassin. Luowang killers are known only by their cold, ruthless code names, and the rumors are already spreading. The one who took the job is the master of the Meteor Butterfly Sword, known within the organization's terrifying ranks. His name is Meteor Shower, a title that, quite frankly, sounds far more poetic than the death it promises. With the threat looming, he wonders how much longer it will be before his master finally returns. Meanwhile, the border between the Xiaoyao sect and the Wanchuan Mountains is growing increasingly unstable as the tide rises. The demonic beasts seem to have gone mad, relentlessly pushing their way toward the southern territories. Countless peak masters and elders have been forced to leave their seclusion to guard the Wanchuan River defense line. Even Uncle Tang is nowhere to be found, leaving our protagonist to handle things on his own. He begins his search, asking a passing disciple if he has seen the person depicted in his portrait. He even stops a young lady to ask for directions to 100 Flowers Peak, claiming he is looking for someone. It seems the Luoyang intelligence network isn't as efficient as they claim if they can't even find one person. He grumbles to himself, wondering how he'll ever earn his 50-stone commission if the target remains so elusive. We see the crowd whispering, wondering if this is indeed the new lead disciple of 100 Flowers Peak, the one rumored to be a top model. Word is he's quite the musician, and apparently, senior brother Muge. He can even perform the latest popular dances. We return to the matter of his terrifying codename within the Luoyang network, which is certainly hard to ignore. He asks Muge if he's noticed the sheer weight of that title within the organization, which carries a rather dark reputation. This sect competition feels incredibly off, and he begins to worry that his secret side job as an assassin has been exposed. He fears the plot to eliminate his junior brother is out, urging his senior to listen closely to the music playing in the background. In his mind, this should be the sound of a brutal, high-stakes arena battle where only the strongest survive. Instead, the female musician is playing a romantic tune, which, to be honest, feels a bit out of place for a duel. It leaves one wondering if this is a serious martial arts tournament or a massive blind date event. A strange choice, indeed. The situation has become quite absurd, but luckily, Muge's skills with the zither are supposedly second to none. He believes it's up to Muge to save the atmosphere before the music drives everyone to a state of romantic distraction. If the music continues this way, the new disciples might just lose their fighting spirit and succumb to the mood. Muge tells him to step aside and leave everything to him, confident that he can handle the situation. It's all a bit of a mess, really, though, as it turns out, there is still the matter of introductions. The young man introduces himself as Zhang Tianyu, the lead disciple of Bright Moon Peak, finally making his identity known. A moment later, he addresses the crowd, announcing that the lead disciple of 100 Flowers Peak is about to perform. He introduces Muge to the audience, who is apparently ready to grace everyone with a formal musical performance. The crowd is stunned that a lead disciple known for performing in entertainment houses would be allowed to play here. The idea of him performing at such a prestigious competition site seems almost scandalous to the more traditional disciples. In their eyes, this is nothing short of a direct insult to Master Tang's reputation, which they find quite hard to swallow. In their world, the path of thousands of killing techniques is the only true way to power. To them, arts like music and painting are nothing more than the trivial distractions of common entertainers. Learning to play the zither, in their eyes, is the same as having no skill or ambition at all. It is seen as a waste of youth, and lately, some rather unpleasant rumors have begun to circulate. They never expected that this mysterious senior brother, whom they had never even met, would actually bring his street performer antics to the sacred stage of the sect's grand competition. One disciple wonders if his senior brother has lost his mind, as his actions have already made their master the laughingstock of the entire sect, though his senior sister suggests it might not be intentional. He can't help but wonder if the man is suffering from some sort of mental affliction. Despite the whispers, one young woman is determined to go and see this senior brother for herself. She rushes forward to get a better look, but she is quickly warned of the hidden danger. There is a distinct killing intent hidden within the notes of that music, which is never a good sign. She realizes that someone is setting a trap for her senior brother right in the middle of the event. This is a deadly setup, proving that the internal unity of the Xiaoyao sect is far from perfect. Whoever arranged this likely has their sights set on their martial uncle as the ultimate target. For now, they must remain calm and watch how the situation unfolds from the sidelines. He looks at his senior brother, convinced that a person like him could never succeed. It seems impossible to him that someone of that character could ever hold their own. In his mind, it is simply out of the question for a person like that to prevail. The Holy Sun is reminded that the grand competition is far from over, and this is where things get truly interesting. As the tension rises, someone asks where he thinks he is going. He replies quite naturally that he is off to catch a spy who is trying to sabotage the sect's grand competition. He intends to avoid the aura of that outsider, the so-called child of fortune, having traveled through many worlds himself. He has gambled against countless chosen ones, and in his view, upstarts like Mu Ge from small mountain villages are the easiest to handle. He believes they have shallow knowledge and simply drift along with the current. Rather than being masters of their own destiny, he sees them as nothing more than slaves to fate. After all, every gift from fate comes with a price that has already been marked in secret, and he intends to be the one who collects that price from everything Mu Ge holds dear. He confronts him directly, asking Mu Ge what his true intentions are for plotting to ruin the Xiaoyao sect's entrance exam. He accuses him of inciting the disciples to kill one another, a heavy charge, to be sure. A young woman quickly defends him, telling the Holy Sun that other disciples were the ones who invited Mu Ge to play. She insists this has nothing to do with Mu Ge and that he is being wrongly accused. The Holy Sun scoffs at the idea of him being wrongly accused, his skepticism clear for all to see. He produces a piece of evidence, asking what it could possibly be if he hasn't mistaken its origin. He identifies it as a token from Tingfeng Ge, the world's most notorious demonic intelligence organization. The crowd gasps at the mention of such a dangerous group, the premier spy network of the demonic path. He turns back to Mu-gu, labeling him a secret agent of the demonic sects. Now that he has been caught infiltrating the Xiaoyao sect, the Holy Sun asks if he has anything left to say for himself. The onlookers are stunned, wondering if the Holy Sun has truly uncovered a traitor in their midst. One disciple asks if there's been a mistake, noting that Brother Mu is the biological brother of Wang Tuxian from the Faxian Holy Land. The crowd whispers that behind him stand 15 powerful prodigies, the so-called sons of the earth. The Holy Sun thinks to himself that no power he has ever set his sights on has ever managed to escape him. He reassures Brother Qianming that there is no need to worry, as they are simply from the same village. He argues that even the prestigious Faxian Holy Land cannot protect a demonic cultivator from Tingfeng. His first step, as he sees it, is quite simple. He intends to expose the supposedly fake relationship between Mu-gu, Wang Tuxian, and those other prodigies. His goal is to shatter Mu-ji's current life and cut off any path for his retreat. We then see a traveler stop to ask a woman for directions, politely calling her Annie. He asks for the way to Shangba village on Mon Mountain, but she snaps back that his whole family are the aunties. She fumes that she is only 16 years old, clearly offended by being addressed as an older woman. She tells him she doesn't care about some nonsense called Shangba village. To be honest, she has never even heard of the place. The traveler continues his search, desperately asking others where this Shangba village might be. The locals are confused, claiming that there has never been a village in this particular area. One old man remarks that he has lived here his entire life and has never once seen a place called Shangba village. He suggests the traveler might have remembered the name wrong, calling him a useless fool under his breath. The traveler wonders if he is looking for the Jinshou Academy instead. He contemplates whether his destination is indeed the famous Jinshou Academy. Not long ago, rumors had spread that Mr. Baitao from the Jinshou Academy had suddenly gone missing. He never imagined, however, that the man would have ended up getting lost in a place like this. He tells himself it is impossible for someone to have no history, yet Shangba village seems to have vanished into thin air. He stares into the distance, wondering where exactly Mu-gu truly came from. After all, it is equally impossible for an entire village to be composed of nothing but sons of the earth. And yet, he finds it hard to believe that he is the only useless failure among them. He shakes his head, convinced that such a thing is absolutely impossible. Deep down, he is certain he must have his own hidden talents, as this current situation simply makes no sense. He decides that failing to find Mu-ji's roots isn't the end of the world, as he has another plan in mind. By forcing Mu-gu to recite poetry, he intends to let the world praise him, test him, and eventually loathe him. In his mind, this is the only way to finally secure Mu-ji's contract for himself. We learn that he has already discovered Mu-gu was a wanted man in the southern kingdom, pursued by the great Marshal Shu Daoshan. The marshal had chased him from the imperial city all the way into the dreaded Ghost Abyss. He wonders how Mu-gu, who only had the cultivation of a mere assistant at the time, escaped a place where no one survives. He begins to suspect that Mu-gu might just be an empty shell, his soul long ago replaced by a forbidden ghost. It is quite strange, he notes, that this forbidden land has become so unnaturally quiet lately. Those terrifying monsters and the chilling winds have suddenly stopped their usual haunting activities. A voice calls out into the stillness, asking if anyone is there, but only silence answers. He has a nagging feeling that as long as he doesn't pry into Mu-ji's past, everything appears perfectly normal. But the moment he tries to peek behind the curtain, the reality of the situation shifts completely. To him, Mu-gu is like a passenger in a carriage where every time the curtain is pulled back, the view outside is a different, terrifying scene from a life filled with unknown horrors. He curses his luck, feeling as though he has stumbled into a past as uncertain and shifting as a ghost story. It seems that Jiao Diao has truly encountered a past that defies all logic, a history that changes the moment one tries to observe it. He realizes with a growing sense of unease that everything he has encountered so far might be nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. Everything he knows seems to be exactly what Mu-gu wants him to know, and the world he sees is merely the one Mu-gu allows him to perceive. He tells himself that it doesn't matter how strange or eerie Mu-ji's origins truly are. As far as he is concerned, here in Xiaoxin City and under his watchful eye, Mu-gu cannot escape the charge of conspiring with demonic organizations. And so, acting as the city lord, he finally gives the order to close the net.